Hello. Back. Excited to be back. Fired up. Spent all night reading post-Marxist literature and watching Rick James documentaries. So if you're not ready for a wild show, I don't know what to tell you. So I'm just going to get right into it. No spiel. Because I'm so excited to be with my homies. Coming all the way live from Miami, Florida. You may know him as the man with the Mau Mau. We know him as the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. I'm back in the co-host chair. As y'all know, my man Jason was on vacation for 2 weeks. I did my best. I hope I did not disappoint my people out there, and I did at least a decent enough job that y'all don't want to Mau Mau me.
I think it's the other way around. I think people are going to be like, fuck, we want Pascal back. But I do want to say thank you very much for holding it down. You did a wonderful job from the episodes that I did watch. Also, I want to thank our wonderful fill-in producer that is sleeping in today, a well-deserved weekend sleep-in, Mean Jean Bajlan.
Oh, by the way, we got to say shout out to a regular viewer of the show who I just noticed she put in the chat. Big supporter. Happy birthday, Shirley.
Oh,
happy birthday, Shirley. Happy birthday.
Shots fired for the birthday.
Shirley is one of our regular viewers.
Happy birthday, Shirley. I wish I had like a happy birthday nice thing on the soundboard.
I just want to let y'all know, by the way, right? Let's let you know how much we appreciate our This Is Revolution family, particularly our patrons. We appreciate them. We like them very much. We love all our supporters, and we consider them part of our kind of This Is Revolution family ensemble.
Yes, because it actually makes the show worth doing, right?
Indeed.
Now, he used to be the black man in Maine. He is one of many colored folks now, just blending in Virginia. Marcus from the Left Flank Vets.
What's up? Happy everyone is here. Happy birthday, Shirley. That's another one.
She gets some shots fired for her birthday.
Some shots fired.
And also here to help us out is another friend of show, friend in real life. He's the host of Pop the Left, Theorizing with the Hammer, and his very own Varn vlog. He does too many things to mention here on the show. He reminded me of some more shit that he does. I was like, damn, I forgot we did a whole show with you talking about that shit. He is maybe Pascal's favorite alabaster leftist. Derek Varn.
Morning.
See Derek Varn in the house.
It's no pressure there. I came in to talk about the post-Marxism, and I have seen one Rick James documentary about 10 years ago and know some probably problematic Chappelle Show skits, and that's about my knowledge beyond 2 songs. So
of Rick James. Look, it's okay. It's okay. We're gonna learn some Rick James shit today. I watched the documentary. I watched every Rick James documentary you can find. I am a fan of his music.
How many Rick James documentaries are there?
Enough.
There are actually a couple. There are a couple.
Enough. I mean,
there's a behind the music, which
behind the music. Yeah, such a that his life kind of took this horrible turn when the whole crack pipe burning happened. Because it wasn't like he just burned somebody with a crack pipe and that was it. He burned somebody with a crack pipe and he beat somebody else up, and it's like, fuck, man, you're really shitting all over your legacy.
Yeah.
It's being.
I mean, to be fair, Rick James did not exactly have the most silver spoon lined beginning. When we start with Mama being a numbers runner ain't exactly going to send you to Groton. You know
wasn't that a book? Wasn't that one of those books, like an iceberg slim book? Mama was a numbers runner. That was not in my post-Marxist reading that I did last night. I did do some post-Marxist reading. But let's bring in Dr. Lillian. She is a postdoc at the Institute of Philosophy at the Free University of Berlin. Her areas of specialization are political philosophy, feminist philosophy, and hot topic, critical theory. Her research is about capitalism, structural injustice, and the intersection of the two, especially the ways in which capitalism influences experiences of social group oppression. Her work also asks how contexts of structural injustice frame the way that we think about our normative criteria for justice in terms of democratic rights and participation. Please welcome, coming all the way from Germany, Dr. Oh, also, I forgot. She is the co-host of the Left of Philosophy podcast. You guys should all subscribe. There should be a link in the description. If not, I think moderator extraordinaire M. Toussaint will put one in there. Dr. Lillian.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. Can you hear me with my microphone?
Oh, we can hear you just fine.
We can hear you. Your microphone sounds
I was hoping you would come in a little earlier so we could get the pronunciation of your, and by we I mean me, of your last name correct. Because I saw David Griscom butcher it and I was like, shit. I don't want to butcher it.
It's Cicerchia. It's Italian, so just all the C's are hard C's.
I was right. I said it that way, and you said I was wrong.
You did not say it that way. You said it all effed off.
Can I tell you guys a secret, though? A lot of Americans actually pronounce it Cicerchia. So, but I live in Europe now, so I don't allow this anymore because it's embarrassing. Because they actually can pronounce Italian words, so they say it right in the first place. So I had to crack down on.
Are you Sicilian? Are you Sicilian?
No, my family, my great-grandfather's from southern Italy, my grandparents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Do you know Sicilians, Pascal?
Capisci italiano das un poco.
A little bit.
I was waiting for you to.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
No, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to come on.
Now, can we call you Dr. Lillian? Is that offensive? Is that problematic?
No, it's beyond problematic to being okay. I can be Dr. Lillian.
Horseshoe theory is real.
Exactly.
Nice. Well, let's start off with this is the first question that people are going to have, and that is just real quick, as quick as possible. It's a long answer. How would you define post-Marxism for those that have never heard the term?
Okay. I would say that it's a way for people on the left, like the new left, to adapt to the philosophical and ideological trends of postmodernism. So people probably think about, know something about all of these words with post attached to the front: postmodernism, post-structuralism, post-colonialism. Post-Marxism is in the same world, the same generation, the same generations, I guess now plural, the same philosophical trends. And I think it's a way to it was a kind of way for especially some European philosophers of the 80s and 90s to fend off some of the influence, in more explicitly anti-Marxist influence, of postmodern social philosophy, social theory. And it's a way of saying we're not giving up the game yet, and a kind of process of adaptation to that. So it's not distinct. It's distinctive because it says it has some kind of allegiance to Marxism, whereas for postmodernists, the primary targets are always liberalism and Marxism conjointly. Like these are the previously emancipatory philosophies of the 19th and 20th centuries that we are superseding, going beyond, figuring out why they're inadequate. And the post-Marxists basically agree, but they don't want to give up the game yet. They're still opposed to capitalism, presumably, and so that's why it's a little tricky. And so it's something of a different conversation as like those other post theories, but it is its own little ecosystem.
Jason, you mind if I have a follow-up question?
I could see you chomping at the bit for a follow-up. Now, Lillian, I will say we did do a show with Professor Vivek Cheber not too long ago about postmodernism. And if time would have permitted, we would have tried to have you on that show, but of course, don't kind of ruin that. So,
okay, I have an idea. I think I have an idea of what Vivek would say about some of this stuff. So I'll try not to repeat the ground he's previously laid and try to say something more specific about this little world. So,
well, Pascal, you ready? Because I know you're chomping at the bit to say something.
Yeah, we did have Vivek on, and I was very, very happy to have Vivek on to talk about postmodernism, post-structuralism, and in terms of context, when you talk about the new left, are you particularly talking about the left that comes out of the 1950s to 1960s kind of Frankfurt School, post-Frankfurt School kind of, Marcuse type of left? Is that the new left you're referring to?
It's in that lineage, but I actually think it's a little farther along the road into the 80s and 90s. And I think what makes it distinctive is its kind of intersection with the fall of the wall and Eurocommunism, and the beginning of the troubles of neoliberalism and the collapse of the traditional orientation of social democratic parties in Europe. So some European theorists are trying to grapple with some real realities of like the fragmentation of the working class, the onset of deindustrialization. But I think that like it's not quite the new left that you're thinking about. It's kind of like people who take some of their suggestions and radicalize them further. So for example, Marcuse would have been somebody who argued that like, the working class isn't the subject of history anymore. They're more conservative. So we need students, we need the new social movements and so on to be the new revolutionary subjects. So he's a Frankfurt School theorist, and he's a part of he's theorizing about the new left, even though he's a little older than they are. The post-Marxists will be people that kind of take insights of people who are already critical of orthodox Marxism a little farther down the road and radicalize them.
I want to ask you one question, and I want to pivot to Derek Vaughan. How much of this do you think is a consequence, as with Marcuse, of the fact that post-New Deal policy in the United States in the West, the working class, through state policy, some would say state capitalism, becomes, as my friend Paul McCombs would argue, embourgeoisied, if you will. Not necessarily becoming the bourgeoisie, but becomes culturally, develops cultural affinity for almost kind of like middle class, petit bourgeois lifestyle, quality of life, if you will. I understand that these terms might be misapplying because they're not actually petit bourgeois because they're still working class. And that how much of these philosophies, I know that in the case of Marcuse, that was pretty much the case, but post-Marxism is about the fact that, for example, you have things in the 70s like Richard Nixon appealing to the hard hats and they're becoming overly reactionary. Is there a correlation between the rise of the working class being deemed as the reactionary foot soldiers of the Republican Party and these philosophies that seem to ascribe their lack of revolutionary capacity to their politics?
Yeah, so I think you're exactly right. There is a correlation. I think the correlation is how you described it is like the background to this is perfect. I would say that these are scholars that seem to think they're so disappointed that workers didn't do what they expected them to do. So these are people who are part of a kind of political zeitgeist. They're being educated by members of the New Left. You know, they're around people that really had a certain kind of amount of revolutionary faith. They thought we were all going somewhere with class politics. But a lot of these people were also a part of like the more cultural side to the left, and they were experimenting with different ways of living and lifestyles and so on. And then what ends up happening is they get so disappointed by workers. They're how did you say it? The embourgeoisification?
Embourgeoisied.
Yeah, embourgeoisied. Yeah, they get so disappointed that workers are not culturally where they are, or that they're not expressing the political interest that they think they should have, that they forsake the idea of class politics as a distinct project altogether. And I do want to say that I think this starts in Europe and then it gets translated back into the US and gets justified retroactively with the kind of justifications that you mentioned, because it's also the case that in Europe, you know, workers are social democracy has done a lot for working people, and people aren't always ready to take the risks to do like something completely else. So you have all of these like radical individuals who are a part of left-wing social movements or just cultural milieus, and they think things should be pushing further, especially culturally, than a lot of the working class appears to be willing to do. They've been betrayed by social democratic parties and so on. And so then you get this kind of reaction to the working class. And I think that that's a really important thing to know. It's not just like an objective reading of the situation and you're saying, okay, the opportunities aren't there right now, we need to try other things. It's actually like a reaction against workers as the potential subject. And I think in the US, the way that this gets articulated is exactly what you said, that workers and the trade unions, they've become more bureaucratic, more culturally conservative. They want to own their homes in the suburbs. They want to be middle class. And therefore, there's no hope for these people. And this is something all postmodernists think, but post-Marxists kind of retain an interest in a revolutionary subject for longer. So students, Black power, feminism, LGBT movements, and they retain an interest in that, and that's kind of distinctive. Whereas postmodernists are just like, they don't try to find the new subject.
Vaughn, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, there's a lot there. Post-Marxism was sort of dying when I was in university 20 years ago, so it's something that I kind of know a little bit about. And I find it interesting that it went from Europe to the United States, although the question of the new revolutionary subject was actually being discussed in Maoist groups in the US kind of concurrently, but with no intellectual backing for it other than just, exploring various nationalisms. The kind of, I guess maybe many consider him right-wing Marxist. Christopher Lasch was writing about this in 65. I want to ask you, though, because one of the things that it seems specific to the post-Marxist, as I know them, and I know them mostly from France, is like the 1, 2, 3 of 68, Mitterrand, the communist concessions to neoliberalism, and then the wall falling, like those things together. Why do you think it had? Why do you think there was any interest in maintaining any relationship to Marxism with some of those thinkers? Because think of like Baudrillard, who makes a hard postmodern break. It's just, and I guess we're more thinking, who would you consider the primary post-Marxist? Laclau, or is that where we're at?
Laclau, Mouffe, Rancière. It would be another big one in France.
I did read that. I read some of that book that you suggested, the Laclau Mouffe book.
Yeah, Hegemony and Socialist Strategy is really the defining text of this kind of break with what they call orthodox Marxism. But Hart and Negri are another pair that wrote Empire and Multitude and a couple other books that are very influential. Deleuze and Guattari are not necessarily like post-Marxist, but they're really absorbed currently into a milieu of people who no longer really think class politics work, and they're more interested in talking about subjectivity under capitalism. And, you know, these, so there are other people that are probably less central, but I would put those people all into the post-Marxist camp. You know, it's hard to tell why they continue to have a relationship with Marxism. And I think you can ask this question of post-Marxists in this more like Francophone tradition. And you can also ask it of critical theory in the Frankfurt School tradition. So these are simultaneous and sometimes connected tracks. These are people who get their theoretical start by thinking about Marxism, and then there's a so-called crisis of Marxism for the historical reasons that you mentioned, and some ideas that don't seem to be tenable anymore. And, you know, you do have to wonder, like, why not just stop talking about Marx? Like, if you disagree with him so much and you think he was so wrong, why don't you just leave him alone? Like, and then leave the rest of us alone? But, I mean, to be honest,
foundation, right?
Right. So you need your foundation, but more than that, you need a kind of claim to being radical. And I think that that's where, like, it gets kind of speculative psychologically in the academy. So the kinds of things that, you know, are being subject to more critique on the left recently, which is that people in the academy kind of make themselves the subject of history and so on. I think that, like, for people who had a connection at one point to social movements, or like to imagine themselves as having a connection to a movement or a campaign or any kind of political project that was like real, once that becomes more tenuous, a part of like yourself is very invested in kind of continuing to be the engaged intellectual, to kind of try to think about things in a transformative way. And sometimes this is very sincere, like not everyone is a cynic, but sometimes it is cynical. Like you want to kind of advance your career, and then you just use Marxism as like the regular stepping stone, because you know no one's going to argue with you if you say Marxism is wrong or white or colonial or whatever. And so post-Marxists kind of claim this space where they get to be the inheritors of a tradition, and it kind of gives them a claim to being connected to a political project that other people are not necessarily connected to any longer in the academy, and perhaps they don't even care to be.
Well, you know, I wanted to ask you, and I'll shut up, Pascal. I'm gonna be quiet for a lot of this show. I booked it, so just calm down. You've been hosting for a while. Let me say some questions. God damn it. Lillian, I watched your appearance on the Left Reckoning show.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned someone that is a favorite author, actually, of Pascal, Cedric Robinson.
Yeah.
And Black Marxism.
I did.
I'm joking because none of us here like that very dense book. Would you call Cedric Robinson's Black Marxism a post-Marxist book? Because I heard you mentioned it in passing, and David didn't really follow up on it. And I'm not going to be mad. David, if you watched, I'm not holding this against you if you didn't read that book. Trust me.
Yeah, I would. I think it's either post-Marxist or kind of a part of the initial bridge from Marxism to post-Marxism. Because the thesis of the book, I mean, there's many theses going on, but one thesis is simply that workers are not the ones with the radical interest in transforming the world, and Black people are. And a kind of undifferentiated population of Black people that, like, not only do they have an interest in overthrowing capitalism, they have an interest in kind of overthrowing the foundations of the whole world. And actually all of the Black Marxists that you have known and studied within that tradition have always been exceeding it, gesturing beyond it. And so he kind of leverages people like C.L.R. James and Du Bois to say, actually, these people never fit into this paradigm. They were always pushing against it, exceeding it. And now we need to transition to this different thing called Black radicalism. And so
that is the precursor, would you say, to Afro-pessimism?
Oh, I don't know. What do you think, Pascal? Do you think that's true? I haven't thought about it like that.
I actually think that Afro-pessimism plays a lot more off critical race theory than it does off Cedric Robinson's Black
I mean,
Marxism.
Cedric Robinson is kind of the foundation for a lot of those people, but Fanon as well.
Well, misreadings of Fanon, yes. But I actually see the logic of where Jason is coming from in that Cedric Robinson kind of intimates the futility of believing in the revolutionary capacity of the white working class, which also kind of creates the foreground to some of Afro-pessimism as well. So I would not say you're incorrect in your connectivity there, Jason, at all. I'm just wondering, when is James Clyburn going to be putting up the hammer and sickle and getting ready to do the revolution, since Black people, quote unquote, are always so radical and revolutionary? And when did the Mau Mau come with Obama? I mean, did I miss the invitation?
Well, I think it is. So first of all, I just want to say that this is Revolution Podcast, brought to you by Black Coin, presented by Spike Lee. Everybody, once everybody gets their Black Coin account, we can start the revolution.
But we give white people less Black Coin.
Of course, they get 3/5 of every one.
Nation matters.
You know what I would say, though, about Black Marxism is I do think it's really foundational to what I think you guys have talked about in this show before, the kind of long life of both andism, like where if we focus on, so I think the argument in that book is that it's not against class politics exactly. It's about, if we actually focus on the radical subjectivity of Black people in America or Black people globally, then the class politics will automatically follow. And so it's kind of like you can get at class politics in a different direction. So I'm not going to argue against it exactly, but the attention should now be over here. And I think that that's kind of a complicated argument that still holds a lot of what I don't know if it's exactly for Afro-pessimists, but certainly for the contemporary left, and some of the common sense that has emerged around, there's a way into to class politics through Black politics or through any other social movement, actually, that isn't directly through the class structure or directly through organizing the class.
Well, really, for someone who had spent several years as a student, and I would say student, I'm not a PhD in Black politics. I'm basically a lawyer by training, but I've written significant on Black politics. I read a lot of Black political thought. One of the main reasons I have with that postulate that, Black people are the vanguard of the revolution is that, number one, it never defines what Black people are you talking about, because it also it's racially essentialist, and it's frankly racist, because you're believing that somehow the physiological reality of having more melanin in a global capitalist system is more likely to make you revolutionary, while not taking into consideration that there are various class structural hierarchies and categories that exist within Black communities. And for me, as someone who was a child of the Haitian Revolution, meaning that my parents are from Haiti, when I hear these things about how Black people are innately revolutionary, and I think about how people who were considered heroes like Toussaint Louverture, within a week of the beginnings of the Haitian Revolution, were trying to cut deals with the French to basically save their own hides. How literally there were people who were less than a decade after the Haitian Revolution, who were also Black, who were trying to cut deals with the French to have them re-recognize Haiti. This notion, and this, by the way, is considered to be the epitome of the most radical or revolutionary activity that has happened amongst Black people in the Western Hemisphere from the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, and maybe in some people's opinion, to today. So this notion somehow that Black people are essentially revolutionary, to me, is profoundly ahistorical, and also takes into this notion that somehow Black people don't have class stratification amongst themselves. And what's even more amazing to me about people who make these postulates, who read things like, you read that into books like Black Marxism or extrapolate that from Fanon, is that one of the things that Fanon warned about, Amilcar Cabral warned about, Kwame Nkrumah warned about, was the rise of the neo-colonial bourgeoisie, or what's known as the comprador bourgeoisie, in that the belief that if you think you're going to be liberated just by having black leaders in these capitalist structures govern you, you're wrong, because they're going to betray the revolution or the radical implementation of that once they get into positions of power. You know, I was having a really interesting email discussion with Adolf Reed about that, and the question I asked him is that does it obscure more than illuminate to make the analogy between the comprador bourgeoisie or the neo-colonial bourgeoisie and the Black American political class? And he said something that was very interesting to me. He said, I think it obscures more than illuminates. And he got me thinking about even that framing. And he said something that's fascinating. He said, why would you assume in the first place that the comprador bourgeoisie would have any more allegiance to the Black proletariat than any bourgeoisie has to the proletariat anywhere? The whole formulation assumes that racial kinship creates an allegiance between Black people who are, under normal circumstances, like in any Western country, would normally be antagonistic. In other words, when we think about it in the American context, we don't think about the comprador bourgeoisie. We realize that the bourgeoisie are innately the class enemies of the proletariat. So why is it that in post-colonial African diasporic analysis, these class actors who are working at behest of capital are considered compradors or neo-colonial? And if you think about it, the only reason you think they are compradors or neo-colonial as petite bourgeoisie or bourgeoisie is that you assume that their racial makeup would give them a natural allegiance. And I didn't think about that until I was having that email exchange with Adolf. And I was like, that's actually correct. And that's when, and Adolf has also said why he doesn't like the term Black misleadership class. And I've always questioned that. And he made that clear on the show. He said, because if you call them Black misleadership class, that assumes that you think that there's a class of Black people who are inherently going to be good leaders. The problem is that you believe that there's going to be a leader who's Black who's going to save you in the first place. You shouldn't believe that a leader, Black, white, or otherwise, is going to save you, because once they have a position of power, they're probably going to betray you, whether they are Black, white, or anything.
I think that the way that this sort of connects to the conversation about post-Marxism and why so here's another way of framing it. These people are so skeptical that workers are going to form the group, be the revolutionary subject. Why does it so happen that they're actually never as skeptical of any other group being able to be that subject? So, when you lay it out like that, Pascal, it's obvious in a certain sense that, like, if you don't look at things through a preconceived racial lens and you actually think, what are the pressures people are under? What are their incentives? How do they think about their interests? What are their material interests, as well as how they perceive them? Then if you actually think that Black people or women or whoever are actually just regular people like everyone else, then you should be able to reach some good, make some good analysis of how it is that these class structures emerge and who it benefits and who it doesn't, and so on. But if you have a preconceived idea of what someone's interests are, then you can't make that analysis. So you have to constantly save the phenomena by of the possible solidarity by obscuring the class structure. And I think the reason that this happens is actually that the whole post-Marxist wave is a rejection of the idea that material interests matter at all. Mm-hmm. Everything is just discourse and subjectivity. We're always just reconstructing our subjects. We're always fragmented. We're always, in some sense, we're all just in a conglomeration of different influences and identities. And so that's what kind of matters to make sense of it. But what's interesting is that they forget about that the kind of racial reasoning just lingers underneath the surface, because they actually do assume that all Black people have the same interests at the same time that they're saying, vacuous things like race is a social construction, or, Black people are not a monolith. All of this is happening at the same time that this assumption is still being transposed onto the framework. And it's not interrogated because they've all already decided that material interests don't matter anyway. So the same racial assumptions just get to continue to reappear without being, the question being asked in most circles, even though they've done such a good job of showing why the working class doesn't necessarily have the same interests, which is, the whole argument in the first decade in which this was popular.
What's also interesting, and I don't mean to take up, is that why do we assume that the same social cultural phenomenon, or even economic, that cause the increased conservatism of the white working class affect the black working class in the same way? We don't think that 50 years of black capitalism, black popular culture being a gateway to conservative ideology, respectability politics, prosperity ministries in the black church, we don't think that has an ideological echo chamber in a way that causes an increasing conservative amongst working class black people? Really? Jason, I'd like Jason to jump in and actually give his 2 cents on that phenomenon. Or Marcus.
Well, the only thing I'd got is that it's even especially when you talk about the Democrats, like that, even the guess that, more black people, more people of color equals more patronage for the Democratic Party is something that they're completely failed at, especially when it comes to Latinos. And, you just go back to Trump, and more so than in the black community having inroads. And there's that kind of failed assumption that, since you're, a minority, or, a person of color, if you're not allowed to use that term anymore, then you will automatically be a Democrat, completely ignoring that people are going to do what they think is in their best interest. But Lauren, I know you had something as well.
I was going to pick up on the fact that Dr. Lillian has been kind of hinting that this has become general left common sense. And I wanted to maybe talk about Hart and Negri's Empire and Multitude books, because in 1999, Empire was on the bestseller list. It was a post-structuralist, post-Marxist text that people were reading who were into the New York Times. And I mean, Negri's own history is very interesting, but the whole strategy around Occupy, around coalitions of oppressed peoples and oppressed groups, black, queer, women, you could add to it. I mean, it was literally the multitude of oppressed groups. Any way to get into this but class was sort of defining at the end of the 90s, and I would say all the way up through Occupy. It was not, and it was remarkably popular in a way that it's hard to even remember how popular it was 20 years ago. It's shocking that an Italian French text like that would sell that well, particularly because it was not necessarily easily written. It was not meant to be accessible. So why do you think it was this kind of post-Marxism was useful for a kind of left? I would see it as recuperation, but I'm putting words in people's mouths if I say that. So a kind of a strategy for a broad left after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Well, I think because it embraces political pluralism, the kind of hallmark of liberal social science under capitalism is that we are all in hypothetically many interest groups, and citizens get together and they try to influence the state, they try to influence policy, and the reason that this is structurally possible is that the state is neutral. The state is not partial to any particular class or group in a liberal society, and therefore we should all and that's how you get phrases like the marketplace of ideas and stuff like that. I think that after the fall of the Soviet Union, let me start back up. first of all, most of the post-Marxist stuff, like Clown Move, that is basically just liberal pluralism. It's kind of adapting to the kind of emerging world of NGOs and universities and foundations that are kind of willing to fund or organize community services and sort of different cultural formations and so on. And then there's also, so this is the kind of where this is all going. It's like a radical veneer on liberal interest group pluralism. And then by the time, the year 2000 comes around, or 1999, and there's these protests against so-called globalization, you have this kind of ready-made pluralism. And, people, there's an expression of a mass of people that are angry and upset. And the idea of a multitude of just kind of different coalitions building, I think people were like, aha, there's something happening now. And we don't need to go back to those old, stodgy and vulgar ideas about the economy and class. We just need to stitch together the right coalition. And I think that was basically the attractiveness of something like that, because it's just trying to make sense of a moment of hope that people who had genuine left-wing affinities had, and clearly some left liberals. That's how I would just make sense of where that book was interesting, why it was interesting to people.
I mean, the question I want to ask though is that what is the utility of this analysis to the contemporary phenomenon that considers itself a left? Notice I didn't call them a left. I said the contemporary phenomenon that considers itself a left. And how do we make this analysis valuable to working class people, Black, brown, white, and otherwise, and get them to think outside of these factions that the ruling class has created for them?
So, sorry, you're asking about how is which analysis useful to working people?
The understanding of the understanding of the legacy of post-Marxism, in terms of how is this, what is the contemporary value that we have in understanding that for today's left, if you will, and how can we make that analysis valuable or important to those people who are suffering the worst vicissitudes of capitalism that we still believe we have to organize to challenge the system?
You're saying there's value in post-Marxism, Pascal?
No. The critique that she's leveraging of it, the critique. Now, how do we make this critique value? How do we implement? In other words, how do we get walking papers from this analysis and make it utilize it for current left and in our organizing spaces amongst white working class folk as well? How do we make this practically valuable?
There was something interesting that you said, Lillian, on another show where you talked about how a lot of these guys all come from the academy. Right. And they're the ones that are going to be bestowing the knowledge upon the proletariat, if you will. So they're kind of in control of everything.
Right. So I think the easiest way to answer this question is to say that this is not useful to working people. And if you're actually interested in organizing them, and I'm an academic, so I'm not going to tell everybody exactly what they should be, how they should be spending their political time. But I'm, of the opinion, I think an emerging cohort of people that were influenced by the Bernie campaign, that the thing that needs to be done is class reformation, and to have a left that's actually in communication or attached in some way to the working class. And if that's true, then there's a couple of things that are just going to become irrelevant right away. And that if you're actually having a political dialogue with somebody who's not just interested in ideas for their own sake, that it will become clear. So I'd say the four things that post-Marxism is interested in is they're obsessed with subjectivity. Okay, so they're obsessed with their own identities, and as well as just theoretically how subjects in the world are formed. They are skeptical of material interests. They do not have any concrete policy programs or structural goals, because they're mostly interested in cultural hegemony, and they're into political pluralism. So if you're interested in organizing working people or in a working class community, I assume that just the act of actually doing something that people do see as in their material interests, that you actually do have a policy platform, that you're not, you may have some coalitions, but you're not, you're partisan in the sense that you want to help poor people, working people, and we need to change the society accordingly. A lot of this navel gazing about like, who are we? And like, how do we not, do all of the bad things that the vulgar Marxists do? Like, I just assume that, if you're actually invested in doing anything concrete, that some of these ideas will just become sort of ridiculous. But I think that there's a hurdle that needs to be. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. So I don't know if that answers the practical question. I think my instinct is to just kind of say, just ignore it. But like people should be aware of these ideas. I think it's a different question of like if you're in DSA or some organizing environment and like you're talking about these kinds of things and somebody who's not in this academic world shows up, that's going to be very alienating. So the first thing you should probably do is just stop, because I don't know why anybody would be attracted except for
I'm a big fan.
More polemical bit, but I genuinely think these are ideas for people who want to see themselves as politically active when they are in fact not. And I assume that if they were to become politically active, you'd have to kind of change your mind a little bit, because you'd have to realize that other people don't think that material interests are vulgar,
So you're giving the audience your endorsement that if someone starts bringing up post-Marxism, you could just say, "Shut up, nerd," and then get back to work.
Yeah, save it for the bar afterward, or not at all, preferably, but if you must.
I was not a fan of I didn't finish the book last night, but I was not a fan of what I read because it was a lot of word salads that kind of didn't say much to me. And it does. And you brought this up. I also listened to your show you did on it, which I don't think I sent to Pascal last night. But what was it called? Why I Hate Class and Love Derrida.
Oh yeah, why we learn to hate class and love Derrida. Yeah.
Which to me, I thought summed up a lot of that reading in a nutshell. I do want to address this super chat with the panel. Do y'all think that Black power politics ever had a chance to be revolutionary, especially since it had the tendency to paper over class divisions?
Ooh, loaded question like this.
Answer it wrong.
Like loaded question, and I'm like, give me the bullets.
Oh shit.
Well, I would suggest
let's let Jason answer. I like Jason's opinion.
Have you ever read? I would suggest reading Cedric Robinson's from
Cedric Johnson.
Which Cedric did I say?
You said Robinson. You almost scared me.
Damn it! Sorry. I hope Ced ain't watching it. I don't want to hear him yell at me about it. Cedric Johnson's From Revolutionaries to Race Leaders, which really answers this question in about 290 pages. But no, I don't really think those politics ever had a chance to be truly revolutionary. I do think there's a little bit of that you can get from those politics, but at the end of the day, what did they really get us? Pascal had a line that early on, before he was a co-host, he said that resonated, and it reminds me of what you said about hip hop, about Black power politics. You remember that?
No, which one is it?
With the boy when we were talking about Boys in the Hood?
What was the line?
About basically Black culture.
Black pop culture?
Yeah, and Black power politics.
Oh, I don't remember. You have to remind me.
That was like a year ago. But no, I don't really think they are revolutionary because of the tendency to paper over class divisions and the need to be race first.
Marcus, do you have thoughts? I'd like to hear your opinions.
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, short answer, no, and then why, it says I think Jason makes a good point of what do these things actually get us, but I'd say the result of a revolutionary action is not necessarily the question whether it's revolutionary or not. So it comes to things of are there a lot of actions that can come out of like any movement, and like those actions can be, you know, revolutionary and simplified, just like outside of like the main structures of society? Yes, will, you know, I mean, I think that's largely like one of the backbones of every one of the conversations that I have with Jason and Pascal, is that, you know, the idea of Black power will not, you know, save Black people or, you know, definitely like the proletariat as a whole. And I mean, a lot of the conversation that we had today kind of points to as to why. So
I want to hear what Derek has to say. Derek is a reader of Harold Crüe, who is a prominent
first
figure.
time Derek invited me on the show was to have a debate about Harold Crüe.
Harold Crüe, who's a prominent
I
figure in that book as well.
I was like, Vaughn, you read Harold Crüe? He was like, yeah. Actually,
Barnes, he pulls out the book out of his back pocket. He's like, who hasn't?
Well, yeah, who hasn't? So the one thing I would say is Black power politics is emblematic of a lot of these kinds of political movements. And I think post-Marxism is an interesting gloss. It's interesting to think that it was a product of the 80s and 90s and not the 60s and 70s, which is really what its main, like the talking points that it's making in obscure ways were already made in the 60s and 70s. I think it was kind of a dead end and instantly recuperable. And I don't just mean that in the terms of like, you know, everybody like Rancière and Laclau and even like Slavoj Žižek kind of broke out into the scene. We forget this, attacking Laclau. That's kind of academically where you started seeing people being interested in actual Marxism again. And I you can tell with the actual how I actually feel about post-Marxism. But I will say that we need to dismiss the nerds, but I do think I do think it is the standing operated procedure of a whole lot of the left, particularly the NGO left, which we could, you know, call them whatever we want to. Maybe they're not really left, but and the other thing I'd say, we haven't brought him up, but the third generation of the Frankfurt School, you know, Habermas and whatnot, they became kind of the crown prince philosophers of the European Union, which is, if you want any relationship to Marxism and you're all of a sudden justifying the EU, it's real hard to see what revolutionary core is still in there. So I would say,
I'll have to be careful. I'll
yeah.
try not to advertise this too much to my European followers on Twitter in case the European liberals get mad at me for being on an anti-EU podcast. I'm just kidding.
But I do think we've seen kind of where this is going. But I also think I don't think this idea is going to just go away just because the post-Marxism is no longer in vogue. Like, I think it's going to come back and keep coming back.
Well,
it's going to keep coming back. It'll still, I mean, I think, you know, I said it was the 80s and 90s because I feel like these are some of this is like really when the new left, they had already gotten their PhDs, they were writing their books. And so that's kind of why I located it in those decades. But I think you're right. Like, the reason that this was so readily spiraled in that direction was because the new left, the movements of the 60s, were already making these kinds of criticisms of Marxism. And, you know, to be fair, I think I'm being kind of polemical usually when I talk about this stuff, but there are some substantive issues here. Like, Orthodox Marxism tended to be, you know, technological determinist. They thought that the more the productive forces of, you know, capitalism evolved, the more it would bring workers together, and the more the revolutionary potential would happen. If you live in like 1912, this isn't crazy. It feels like that's what's happening, and that's what they predicted, and they were wrong. And so there's several generations of disillusionment. And basically what happens is, like, the wrong conclusions get radicalized. Like, there is another way to talk about, to be a materialist, to have sociological analyses that don't essentialize people, that don't assume interest, that think about constraints. You can do all of this within a Marxian framework. It's just that wasn't what was in vogue, and so it got pushed into these other directions. And I agree that it's not going anywhere, because post-structuralism, postmodernism, they have literally broken our brains. Like we have experienced a long decline in ability to think about social structure, to see the difference between like political strategies and just other kinds of theoretical conversations, and that's a product of all of this. Like if you can't figure out that your meta theoretical framework in the background is not the same thing as a political strategy because you haven't been taught to think politically, that's a huge problem, and that's something that this generation of people kind of bequeathed to us. And so it's definitely not going away because it's no longer in vogue. In fact, what I see is people trying to learn to think about structure again and actually falling back on the same stuff that was wrong. Like, why are we still talking about like multiple systems theory? Or why are we still talking about like the same stuff that the New Left was talking about with who is the political subject? You know, these kind of recapitulating these debates about Black power that Cedric Johnson analyzed so well in that book, and I think convincingly. We're doing it all again because we haven't actually like confronted that maybe we need to like stop following this particular train of thought.
Well, why do you think there is a fetishization, sorry, of, if we want to talk about Black power, there's definitely a fetishizing of that era as if it was the revolutionary era, end all be all. Why do you think that is? And I asked this question to here, let me change the screen so you know. I'm asking this question to everybody on the panel. Why do you think that is?
I like to answer. Yeah, why want to answer directly when someone says, do I think Black power had more revolutionary capacity? I said the main reason why I don't believe it did is it doesn't ask a simple question. Which Blacks are going to have the power? Because one of the direct consequences of Black power is that we have the development of the Black political class. And one of the reasons why I didn't think it had revolutionary capacity is that it never reckoned with the reality that there are internal class stratifications that exist within the Black community, and that even within itself, i.e. through the Black National Convention of 1972, those Blacks who were more proximate to the ruling class and able to use their political power to leverage and enable themselves to gain the political higher up reflected their class political interests.
And also like this conversation is something like Pascal's talking about, the 72 Gary Convention. We're still having the 72 Gary Convention conversation 50 years later when Ice Cube is taking up that much of the media sphere, going, well, what are you going to do? We need to have a Black block of votes. I'm like, okay. We need to have a Black agenda. What is the Black agenda?
Why does Robert Smith, who is worth $4.4 billion, maybe more, who is Black, supposed to have the same Black agenda as a Black person who's a fry cook at McDonald's? Because they're both Black.
Because they're both down, brother.
You ain't
down, know what's up.
And which position are more Black people closer to? Robert Smith, who's the billionaire, or the Black person who's the fry cook at McDonald's? And next question, guess whose interests the Black agenda are more likely to reflect? The fry cook at McDonald's or Robert Smith, the Black billionaire?
That's something that like I find I mean just it makes me crazy thinking about how like there's this messaging of, yeah, you know, you have the Black politics, or, you know, this is what we're doing for Black America, X, Y, and Z, and you put in front, you know, like Joe Biden. We're like, even by the metrics, right? So if anyone says like comes and says like, oh hey, you know, oh yeah, I'm for Black people, what's one of the first things you go to? Criminal justice reform, you know, like, or you know, yeah, reparations if they want to go that far. But I mean, like criminal justice reform, especially within the Democratic Party, is kind of like that fucking go-to. Oh yeah, there's lots of Black guys in prison. We're gonna let y'all smoke some weed. It's cool. We down. Roll the blunts, right? But even at just the face value, it's like when you put up Joe Biden, you know, who puts up the institution of mass incarceration, it's kind of like this wild thing where even like the rhetoric is just so fake because like they can just throw something right in your face. But somehow, because he chooses Kamala Harris, Chucks and Pearls, don't mind the DA record. And like, I don't know. It's just so blatant and in your face that this whole like black agenda it's fake. It's just all fake.
Adding on to the black agenda, I do want to say before we add on to the black agenda, thank you very much,
Dr. Lillian. Tell us where we can find you. I really appreciated you joining our podcast and illuminating the facts of post-Marxism to us. I think it was very, very valuable. And please share where we can find your work. We can find you on Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter at Cicerchia, and my podcast I do with my Left of Philosophy crew is at Left of Phil, so you should follow us.
Is that an in-studio show? Is that an in-studio show?
No, we recorded it ahead of time. We're thinking about doing some live stuff, but yeah, so far
Are you guys all in the same room though?
Oh no, we're on Zoom. We record it.
Oh, okay. Wow. It sounds really good. It sounds like you guys are all in the same room. I heard. I was like, oh.
I'm gonna tell one of the guys on the podcast guild does that, and he will be very happy to hear it.
Well, he's doing a great job with the sound.
I actually thought maybe before I go, I have maybe an answer to the first question that Jason asked about Afro-pessimism. Because I didn't quite stitch it together at the time, but I think that like if part of the project of like the kind of post-Marxist wave is to try to find the new revolutionary subject and fails to do that, something that like is important about Black nationalist politics is like that Black people are can form that kind of subject. And then it's kind of like if you realize that's not going to be politically cohesive and you can't develop a forward-looking project in that direction, and you realize it's not possible, but you also think that the working class is essentially reactionary and it's not possible to have any kind of political subject, then yeah, you are going to become pretty pessimistic. Like politics becomes politics becomes not possible. And I know that there's some very attempts to theorize that systematically, but it would make sense to me. It would follow, even though I think it's kind of a different thing than post-Marxism.
Well, before I bring in our next guest, I do want to ask our other guests, Derek and Lillian, if you guys want to stick around for a hot minute, because we are definitely going to take a little bit of a turn in the conversation from post-Marxism to a question that has caused several off and on air fights with my co-host. And this is the man that's going to resolve this debate. He is a music journalist. He is one of the founders of the Black Rock Coalition, which, gave me courage to pick up a guitar some years ago. Formed the band Burnt Sugar. He is Mr. Greg Tate.
Greg Tate in the house.
Greg.
Here to muddy the waters and confuse the issues once again.
Well, I have to ask this question, and everybody on the panel is free to be a part of this conversation. Like we said, this is a community that we're trying to form here. Pascal does not believe that Earth, Wind, and Fire is indeed Black Yacht Rock.
Oh,
that's sacrilegious to even say that.
Black Yacht Rock. I don't even know what that is.
Earth, Wind, and Fire, Frankie Beverly.
Yacht Rock. What categorize yacht rock?
Yeah, I mean the only Black people I know that have yachts are like rappers who get them rented for videos.
Which is exactly what I said.
And now my good friend Mr. Lukman Brown, his dad used to enter him in yacht races with like Yale prep school boys, and he used to kick their ass when he was like about 16. Then he discovered punk rock and he abandoned all of that. So we are people of many pieces, many segments. Because Earth, Wind and Fire. Now, Earth, Wind and Fire, I knew was the band that kind of leapt on the scene with the album Last Days in Time in 1972, and then went on. They did what was the album after that? Keep Your Head to the Sky, and then oh man, the album that had Mighty Mighty, Kalimba Song, you know, and they just continued to you know, they were part of the funk self-contained funk band movement that included War, Parliament Funkadelic, Shaka Khan and Rufus, Mandrill, so forth and so on. Yeah,
Jason is trying to say that Earth, Wind and Fire is elevator music for dentist's office.
Well, I wouldn't say all that.
At this, well, I mean, but you know, the whole thing is like actually when the firm, the company Muzak went out of business, like Blue Note Records actually leaped into the void. So now the elevator music of today, and I heard Blue Note Records being played in the hotel elevators in Denver, Colorado, last time I was out there. So the thing is, Black culture just tends to have incredible longevity in the public sphere, you know. So we make the music that lasts and it becomes definitive, and it starts at the margins. It starts in like, you know, sometimes the gutter of America, like the blues did. And next thing you know, I go to Radio City to see an all blues concert, and the acts are mostly Black, and the audience, the capacity audience is mostly white. You know, I mean, can we help it that we're so fly? I don't know. You know, I mean, you know, it's like, it's, I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, with Burn Sugar, we travel all over the world. Everywhere I go, we're already there. You know, hotel. I mean, if I go to Paris and Italy, man, I'm not hearing Debussy and Puccini in the restaurants, in the you know, the elevators, the hotels. You know what I mean? It's like I'm hearing Earth, Wind and Fire. You know what I mean? I'm hearing Al Green. I'm hearing like Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis, and Jackie McLean. You know, like, you know, because what we represent in sound, and I mean, and in other aspects of performative, expressive culture, is modernity. You know, you want to sound like today, then Black music is going to be your pimp theme song. You know.
Greg, I want to ask you a question on that. All right. One of the themes that we have on this show is called the 50-year counter-revolution. The premise of that theory is that basically from the assassination of Martin Luther King to today, the politics of American and Western society overall has been a counter-revolution against the new left and the politics of the New Deal Civil Rights Coalition and everything that came out of that. So that's where we get the theme, the 50-year counter-revolution. One of the things that we talk about. What do you say?
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
One of the things that we talk about the 50-year counter-revolution, and knowing that you are an enthusiast and scholar of Black popular cultural creation, is how the American ruling class use Black popular production as a tool of social engineering of Black political and social behavior, particularly after the riots coming out of the Kerner Commission. My question is to you, as an enthusiast of Black popular culture and musical creation, how do you reconcile the obvious value and importance of Black popular culture and its historical nefarious utility by elements of the American ruling class for social engineering purposes, i.e., how jazz was used in the Cold War to expound American capitalism to the developing world? How do you reconcile that analysis, if you will?
Let's go back to the 1930s. Let's go back to the New Deal. Let's go back to why there's a 5-day work week and there's no more child labor and there's unemployment insurance and all these other ideas of the revolutionary, the radical left of that time that got assimilated by the capitalists to save capitalism from working class insurrection at that time. You know, I mean, I think the thing is that the thing about capitalism is that it works at warp speed. It's anarchic, you know, and it's very much about self-preservation. And if once you know, the capitalists saw the threat of the Bolsheviks, they sent money to Trotsky and Lenin. You know what I mean? Because the Tsar didn't want to join the international banking system, you know, but because they needed to figure out how to pay the army, you know, like the J.P. Morgans and Rockefellers and those folks showed up with the cash because they knew the threat of the Bolshevik Revolution to their own interests, you know, worldwide. So I put what Black people have contributed in terms of our radical popular music, but popular culture, in that category of things that do get swiftly assimilated, you know. But it's also swiftly assimilated in a context where Black people have their American dreams, you know what I mean, where we have an aspirational culture. It was like I have a brother-in-law, very well-known Marxist scholar, Mr. Tony Bogues. You know, he's married to my sister, Drew Augusto. And when Barack Obama was running for president the first time, he was amazed that so many Black Americans were so invested in a Black man becoming president of what Kathleen Cleaver calls the United Snakes of America. And my sister, she just straightened him out. She just said, like, you have to understand that for Black Americans, the most important thing is inclusion, right? Ooh. So, and of course, let's not downplay the fact that when we talk about a radical Black culture, radical Black agenda, radical Black activists, and so forth, you know, I mean, we're talking about a minority of our community, or we're talking about people who are specialists in that, you know, because if I've learned nothing from being in Harlem for 35 years, is that what my neighbors are most concerned with, unlike myself, you know, who reads who follows, you know, 4 or 5 newspapers a day, it's about, you know, surviving the journey from working back, picking up their kids, and, you know, hopefully being able to spend some time with them on the weekend. You know, survival, you know, under the system. You know what I mean? So there are times when the movement can articulate itself in a way towards real specific goals that people can get their heads around and support, you know. But a lot of what we do to most folks is very arcane and esoteric, you know. And in some ways, the people who have been the best translators of that to kind of mass Black culture, you know, have been, you know, our artists, our Nina Simones, our Curtis Mayfields, our, you know, James Brown for a lick, you know, but Earth, Wind and Fire was part of that. P-Funk's part of that. You know, these are folks who've been able to, you know, I mean, you know, of course, all the way up to, you know, Public Enemy and KRS-One, other folks in hip hop we want to talk about. But it's like in these conversations, we don't respect enough that we're talking to ourselves. And we ain't talking to the other, it's like the other 40 to 50 million folks, you know, that are who we mean when we say our people. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's a deaf ear, man. You know what I mean? And let me just say this, you know, it's like I was not, I don't know that I've been as surprised by anything from the right wing ever than that they saw something called critical race theory as a threat because I got about four books called Critical Race Theory on my shelf, and it's like I got to decide if I got time to read a chapter. You know what I mean? Because it's like I thought I was a smart dude, but I was like, damn, I need to decipher this shit. You know what I mean? So you know, and it's like I know vaguely what they're talking about there from a semiotic post-structuralist perspective, but you know, yeah. I mean, and yeah, man, it's you know, it's like I mean, we gotta. It's like if you're a black intellectual at this point in time, you know, you kind of gotta laugh at us as a class within a class, you know, in terms of our sense of self-importance and relevance, you know, like, I mean, we're part of a lineage, you know what I mean? Like, you know, Prince Hall, you know, Denmark Vesey and Martin Delaney, and, you know, like Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth. I mean, you know, Harriet, you know, I mean, you know, this black intellectual tradition is kind of built on what these 19th century pioneers did in terms of responding to the critical demands of the movement for justice in that time, you know. But you know, things have become you know, quite diversified and fragmented since then in terms of agendas. Yeah, I'll just say that.
Someone says the revolution will be commodified. I definitely agree.
Oh yeah, well, you know, it's funny, man, because you know, like I listened to Gil's piece now with a different sense of his satire, you know, because I realized like, oh, what he's really saying is there ain't gonna be no revolution because we into all of this commercial shit now. At the time, it was like black people were like, you know, like knew all the references that he was making, you know, like in the negative about, you know, what was not gonna happen, because that was what was happening. That was where we were by the time, you know, he made that in the 1970s. Like, yeah, we was caught up in American commerce and TV culture, you know, and commodification as anybody. You know, it's like our consciousness had already been commodified, you know, even before you get to the appropriation aspect. It was like just the fact that we all had all that garbage in our heads that we knew what Gil was referring to. You know,
is a song like I'm sorry.
What's that?
No, I was gonna say, is a song like the Revolution, and I'm asking this question to you, Mr. Tate, and the whole panel. Yeah. Is a song like Gil Scott Heron's "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" maybe the anthem of the defeat of the New Left?
Well, I mean, I think Gil made it explicit like a few years later when he made "Winter in America." You know, said you know all the you know, democracy's ragtime on the corner and all the healers have been killed. You know, like he recognized by the time you got to mid 70s, and Nina Simone, you know, spoke on this as well. She just like, somebody asked her, you know, what's the state of the civil rights movement? She said, they're all dead. You know, all my friends in the movement are dead, you know, who created that movement are dead, you know. So, but, you know, because well,
do we see a shift then in the music then? Because if you think, let's go back to that era of the 60s, the mid to late 60s, and after 68, which Pascal loves to call the beginnings of the 50+ year counter revolution, right? The 53 year counter revolution. Does the music, especially in the black music world, does it make a shift? Because also the mid 70s, we have disco, funk. As much as I'm a fan of it,
well, I mean, you know, music? I mean, look, yeah. I mean, I think that I think what brothers calling a counter revolution is really it's COINTELPRO. You know, it was the like a revolution happened in America on April 4th, 1968. I mean, I think it was 100 cities went into flames, you know, and after that, Richard Nixon decided, well, we better put some money in the hands of these black middle class people and then exterminate these radicals. So, but in musical terms, like, I mean, we got even bolder. It's like after James Brown had proved the point with Say It Loud that you could be that militant and still be on the radio, man. Then Gamble and Huff started, Philly International.
Then what happens to James Brown, right? James Brown, the man that owned not just pressing plants and recording studios, also owned radio stations. And what's the line that I can't remember? Was it Spiro T. Agnew said? I can't remember who it was that said, "A man that can stop a riot can start a riot."
Yeah, which echoes the thing about what happened when what the police captain said in Harlem when Malcolm got all those folks to go to the station, and then just with a gesture got everybody to turn around and go home. But I mean, and it all kind of culminates in Hoover talking about stopping the rise of another black messiah, and to the extent that his paranoid, insane ass became obsessed with anybody who had charismatic powers. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, by the time he died, had a 2,000-page FBI file. So did Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin. And we know what happened to all three of them. You know what I mean? But I mean, within the culture, I mean, people, I mean, as to quote Curtis, kept on pushing. He kept making, powerful music. And we moved, and we were able to take advantage of that opening, which is, was kind of the precedent-setting cycle for where we are now, in the sense of when folks threaten private property, when black folks threaten private property, suddenly money flows like the heavens, from the ruling class. It's like a friend of mine's got a Tulani Davis, the writer, like she half jokingly says George Floyd is mighty because of all the dollars, that have flown to, to various black institutions in the last year and a half, or the appointments that have been made. Or, I just say that, anytime black folks break a store window in Baltimore, about 5 black writers are going to receive like major literary awards that year. It's like we move to the head of the class. It's like, I mean, and it's just blatant. I mean, you just see, like, man, people that they wouldn't even be thinking about. They say, "Oh, there's a Negro. Oh, wait a minute, there's a Negro back there. Move him up."
And I mean,
look, a friend of mine who's running a very small art institution in Chicago. She's the head of the Guggenheim now, man. You know what I mean? It was like, yeah. I mean, that fear and guilt reflex in at the top tier white America. Oh, it's real. I mean, the people who are the most insulated are the people who react the first to like get some black people in here so that, like, our building don't get burned down and shit. You know what I mean? Like they, it's like it's that weird thing. You know what I mean? It's just like, we mess up some. We break a window, of a pharmacy on half a block in Baltimore, and the next thing is martial law, but the next thing is like some, black writer you like, as one some prestigious award, or somebody got some prestigious job that never would have been presented to them, man. So, this is the game. Mm-hmm. That's what, this is, and I mean, all of this is like a game to manipulate and to try to siphon energy from, black radicality, black radical movements, black radical culture, and I mean, but and part of that as well is like you're dealing with the fact that again, like, why we got to be so fly, we're everywhere. It's like all 54 countries in or nation states that are part of the African continent have a hip hop scene. I didn't know this until I started listening or started following allafrica.com, because they're telling you, about the hip hop scene in Uganda and Malawi and Tunisia and Namibia. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's Africa, but saying go to Asia. You know what I mean? Like
there's a burgeoning scene in Asia that even China's trying to repress.
It's established. China got punk rock and hip hop happening. You know what I mean?
Some of the China stuff I've seen is like it seems to be like stuck in mid 2000s R&B.
No. I mean, they got
some that's like very contemporary.
Well, I just saying it's like you got like dude like where like he's got bandana, cornrows, like straight up chrome chain. He's sitting on the edge of the bed, passed out girl.
But hey, bro, it's like it's fun, because look, cornrows, made Al Iverson a thug. You know what I mean? So this is what I'm saying. It's like our culture like moves from radical margin to definitive in the center of popular culture because it's so fly. Like, I mean, Iverson was like David Stern's nightmare. You know what I mean? Like, the fact he was as popular as he was in the league. He represented straight up hood gangsterism. So, I mean, and what you deal, what you deal with in our culture is also, that point where, of course, as things evolve, because I like to say in pop culture, a generation is every 3 years. So every 3 years, kids decide, well, sagging jeans ain't cool no more. Like, we wearing tight, skinny jeans and cornrows ain't cool no more. So, we're gonna express ourselves with by bringing back the flat top or something. You know what I mean? But I mean, and I mean, look, we have this singular kind of reality for ourselves culturally, nationally, politically, in that it's like there's no other culture in the history of the world that came out of slavery and then became the definitive popular culture of the former master culture, and we occupy so much. It's like it's even hard to, you can't reconcile the alleged 12% of the population with just our impact. We seem more omnipresent than we are. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, as much as, we might have a critique of, what's going on in hip hop now, but then you have to step back and say, damn, where else do young black men have a voice in America? It's like nowhere.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And if I'm sounding provocative, maybe it's because I'm trying to be. But what are the consequences of having probably the most oppressed minority group by size in a country be relegated, at least in the public consciousness, as the entertainment of the ruling class that oppresses them?
Well, again, like the blues existed as a genre, in the same way that hip hop does, because the requirements for entry are very low relative to anywhere else. It's like the only place you can go in and like be a kid from South Bronx circa 1980 and sell 1 million records and get whatever, or become, like fast forward, like a branded endorsed billionaire, by doing something that is the very, it's like when we talk, definition of culture I like is the one that says, culture is what people do. Well, all these things, as we know, that represent commodified black culture are stuff black people will just be doing. You know what I mean? In the community anyway. You know, rapping, dancing, playing basketball. You know, I mean, so and these things. The thing about it is like, yeah, you talk about being a, you know, like the entertainment of the ruling class, but it never starts out. It starts out as like some denigrated nigger shit. I mean, you know what I mean? Like that's what it is. When it all first comes on the scene, you know, it's like blues, like they call, you know, that was called race music. You know what I mean? Like the Billboard charts, like for the longest time, you know, their R&B charts didn't reflect radio play, but the number of records that were sold out of the black mom and pop record stores, you know, in all the major urban areas. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's like we began so like disrespected, you know, and denigrated and sidelined in the American cultural context until we're not, you know, until like, you know, we win another battle for position, you know, for presence, for prestige in the American context, you know, and we are in the American context, you know, so folks are going to make moves that are reflective of their aspirations to get from one place to another. And something like popular music, where, you know, really, I mean, it's still just more, it's a more democratic opportunity than we have anywhere else in America, you know. Yeah.
Derek, you want to say something?
Nothing starts out as the entertainment of the ruling class. It's like they're you know, because generally like white America, you know, is generally like about 10 to 20 years behind Black America, you know, because we're so avant-garde with our stuff. You know, when we launch the next iteration of it, like it's alien, you know, and you know, and you know, I mean, one of the benefits of our tragic history is that we're not burdened by nostalgia. You know what I mean? I like the Black comedian Flip Wilson. You know, his definition of Black America is that we belong to the church of what's happening now. You know what I mean? So, as soon as we flip, you know, the switch on what's cool, what's hip, what's modern, you know, we are there. We done left, you know, yesterday's blues behind. You know what I mean? But and white folks, you know, and the rest of the world is catching up. You know what I mean? It's like I mean, I like the fact that you know, like particularly in Paris, like the Arab and African kids, like their hip hop aesthetically is the one outside of America that I just feel is killer. You know what I mean? Like there's just something, and it has something to do with just like maybe it's just the rhyming possibilities of Arabic, you know, and French. You know what I mean? But they got, you know, they got strong rhymers, they got strong beats, you know. But if you know, I check in on the beats they're using now, it's like, well, they sound like Southern hip hop. They're still saying their thing. They're still being oppositional. You know, some of the cats and getting put in jail for it, you know. But in terms of the musical form, you know, it still follows what's happening here, you know. So and that's, you know.
There's something I just want to add on real quick is that
yeah.
I did an interview with a artist Narcy, who he's Arabic and Canadian. It was like dad's from Iraq. But like yeah, like you were saying, there's like something about like Arabic and and hip hop that it does something different to the music, where it's just like it definitely is like and like I don't understand the language, so at this point, you know, it is
yeah, but we can feel the flow
out of the beat. You know? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yes,
yeah,
100%.
I mean, like yeah. I mean, that's for me. That's the international hip hop that just got the most funk and groove to it, you know.
But Varn, did you you had something interesting?
Yeah, I was I don't feel that like super confident like speculating about Black culture for obvious reasons, but I will say that one thing.
Oh man, jump in, the water's fine. Everybody does.
Yeah.
I will say one thing I've noticed though when I was thinking about the kinds of diaspora art communities, and we were talking about how like when things got bad in the 70s, the art got more assertive and better. I come out of the Jewish community, and the same was true in the 30s and 40s, where we were producing pretty good art, kind of unique to ourselves. And as we've become fully whitenized or whatever, our art sucks. So
how dare you say that about Seinfeld?
I mean,
Larry
so,
David.
But I mean, in all seriousness, there does seem to be an unfortunate relationship between these cultural communities and out marginalization and oppression that leads to things like it leads to interesting developments. Like, whenever you have riots, you're going to see a ton of Black artists who are upper middle class get a lot of money. But you're also it also seems like there's like a direct relationship between the quality of the art, almost inverse to the political power it has. Like,
Bart, can I actually ask you a question? I mean, like,
Go
can I
ahead.
just ask you, like, what, like, do you think that the acceptance of Jews within, because you're saying is like when the U.S. was more anti-Semitic, the art out of the Jewish community was better. Like, would you say, their, I guess, larger acceptance across the United States is, I guess, like where it does turn into where you've just got Larry David and Seinfeld, and this is what the Jewish people provide for our entertainment. And then I guess do you think that? And like, I guess the question would be, would Black entertainment and art eventually come down to just Blackish in the Cosby Show?
Yeah, I wonder.
Well,
I mean, go ahead.
No, because I'm going another spiel. So go ahead and say your
All right,
piece.
just to answer the question, I don't necessarily think it's because I don't think it's the cultural reasons. I think there are like material reasons why the art becomes less vibrant, because we're more affluent. Like Jews in America after the 1950s and 60s are one of the most affluent singular demographics in the country. We're more insular and more cut off, and yet we're also more readily accepted. I wonder, for example, not to sound like dire, but a lot of the stuff I've seen coming out on television productions and stuff lately that seem to embrace Black culture seems a lot less vibrant than what I saw 10, 15 years ago. And I want to know what you guys think the relationship is between this influx of money, basically, and the vibrancy of the arts being produced. Does the money actually do something to it negatively?
So I read, and I want to get Mr. Tate's response to this. I had read something recently where someone was talking about, they called it clap and stomp music. And like, so if you remember that kind of Americana folk revival of the early 2010s of the Mumford Sons type bands, right? All these white guys dressing like fucking turn of the century tramps. And I was kind of meshed in that because of working festivals, and all those cats were headlining really large festivals. And around this same time, a little bit before that, Bain Capital bought iHeartRadio. And one of the guys for Mumford and Sons, I believe their parents were someone big in the church. And then they felt that that kind of music was really good to put ads to. Ads went with it real well because it was real simple. And that became, for a while, it still is pretty large music. Those guys right now probably could headline any kind of pop festival now still, or at least be main stage talent.
Well, I interviewed Betty Carter early in my career. She just pointed out to me, she said, "Oh, there's white people making millions of dollars in music that you ain't never heard of." It's like, but I want to go, I want to take a second to talk about this whole question of Jewish cultural production, post-war, because as we know, the concentration camps made Jews white in the eyes of the imperialists, and they had their own role. Jews were, with the creation of the state of Israel, were given an opportunity to play in the big chess game, of the Cold War, and to represent the fact that the biggest fascists in the world, the European colonial powers, were then seen as the most humane and empathetic and supportive of people who come through Hitler's fascism, because as somebody pointed out to me, Hitler essentially got vilified for doing to Europe what Europe was doing to the rest of the world, right? So, but what you see in the assimilation, of Jews into mainstream America, is a diminution in terms of a group, of an ethnically self-recognizing cultural production, because, and the last gasp of that would have really been the great Jewish post-war novelists, that came through, the Bellows and Malamuds and Mailers, but nobody, it's like after that, you don't get necessarily Jews identifying as Jews, as artists in America, as a group, So, I'll stop with that particular thesis there, but to now I want to leap into why you'll still find vitality, great vitality in terms of Black cultural production. And it relates to me, what's the core point of Frank Wilderson's Afro-pessimism, which is that from the perspective of the ruling class, we don't occupy a space of Black versus white, but slaves versus humans, right? And what he's essentially saying is that the social position, the perception of Black people, as an oppressed group, is that of people who are still in the slave position, right? Are still treated as slaves, and we see the evidence. 1619 Project, just brought out how algorithmic it is, to the point where you don't even need like a white, even like a white face, for racism. It's happening in the paperwork, in the administration of racism, where it's like you as a Black Harvard grad goes to get a bank loan, and the bank officer's got a piece of paper that says Black applying for a loan. No, doesn't matter what the bona fides are. Yeah, whereas like the white high school dropout that comes in is gonna get treated, probably as well as like the white middle class person, and I'll just say that, like, so the thing is, like, what Wilderson further points out that I think is critical is that the violence that we look at in terms of other groups is something that essentially is a negotiation that's between what Wilderson calls humans and junior partners, or humans, people who don't occupy the slave status that we do. So part of that is that we maintain, like, the alienation that we feel is one of the sparks, to the ignition of all this cultural innovation, because we are still trying to prove our humanity, assert our humanity, really, in a context where we are not seen as human, and we are dealt with as if we are not human. It's like, yeah, the fact that weed is legal and everybody, whoever got prosecuted for it, is going to still do that 30-year term is a proof of that. You can still treat this population like slaves, and the violence, as Wilderson says, that's committed against us, it's not purposeful, it's gratuitous.
Well, I'm not a fan of Frank Wilderson or Afro-pessimism. I think he's complete trash, and I'll tell you why. At the same time, Frank Wilderson is making these arguments. 75% of black wealth is still owned by 10% of the black population, and much of the punishment and brutality that black people are experiencing in black cities is done under the management of black elites, black police chiefs, black cops, black mayors, and it's at the same time all this brutality is happening.
But who are the employees of?
The employees of black political establishment, the black political class in those cities, and the notion
they work for the man too, man. They work at City Hall.
Yeah, exactly, and they're protecting their class.
George is a perfect example of a state that's dominated by black people.
They're managers of some. They're managers.
Yeah, and they're protecting their class interests. Well, so do we assume that they have some kind of I'm supposed to believe that they have some innate kind of super magical racial kinship that makes them say, because I have melanin, normally if it wasn't for my paycheck, making sure that I'm going to keep the system going.
Look, most black people in this country who work are employees of the government. Most of them are not managers; they are employees.
That's true. And but the thing is,
I'm just saying that the people that you're looking at as being the managers of this have masters. They are not the.
I would push back really hard on that. Let me say this before Pascal gets all upset. Okay. I would push back really hard on that, because basically you're saying that these Negroes can't do anything on their own without a white person pulling their strings, and I don't believe that. No, and I say look at Georgia as a perfect example.
Brother,
who does Barack Obama work for?
I'm saying the policies they are enacting are designed above their pay grade. They are simply,
I disagree wholeheartedly. And I'll point out Maynard Jackson is a perfect example in 70s Georgia. There's a long list of black Tom Bradley in Los Angeles,
and they are like essentially like servants of the ruling class. But they are not the designers of this. It's like I go back to 1619 Project. It's like what that section really brought out was that racism is it operates at an algorithmic level.
Yeah, but it doesn't affect black people of all classes the same way, and oftentimes black people at higher classes. Bro,
I'll give you an example of how it does. It's like the medical mistreatment of pregnant black women is shown to affect a Serena Williams and the sister that's got food stamps.
But Greg, you realize that the main reason why black women suffer from medical mistreatment is largely because a super larger proportion of them use Medicaid as their treatment for.
But I'm telling you, it's like. It's because of the denial of a black woman's humanity. When she walks into a hospital, it doesn't matter where she is on the class scale. She is as likely to suffer infant mortality as
Serena Williams. I believe the Serena Williams story comes from her having to go to an emergency room because her doctor wasn't available. Serena Williams has a doctor.
No, but here's the thing. I'm saying that what the analysis shows is that it doesn't matter where a black woman, not just a Serena Williams is, because this is the way systemic racism works. And it's like
what the analysis demonstrates actually is that poor and working poor black women have worse health care and material physical treatment. And because most black women are poor and working poor and depend on Medicaid, that will result in worse treatment because they have such dealing with inferior health care, because most of the people who take Medicaid are not providing the best services. There's a very good book by called Racecraft that talks about how racialized statistics create the illusion of comprehensive racial suffering when actually the suffering is suffered by mostly poor and working class
and that was
black
the one
people.
thing that I didn't like about the New York Times piece. I mean, the New York Times piece is illuminating in the sense of there is a problem with infant mortality in the black community, but what Pascal brings up about, you know, poverty doesn't really get brought up as much as the race aspect. So the entire article is almost ontological in the sense of if you are black and you are female, you walk into a hospital because of the Serena Williams situation, well, then it's all bad for you. It's
The
almost
same-
like the Oprah and the purse situation.
It's like a perfect example of mass incarceration. I'll hear this by most of my college-educated fraternity brother men who go on Martha's Vineyard every summer. They're like, oh, we got the same amount of chance of getting arrested and shot by a cop as a brother in the hood. That's statistically false. A college-educated black man has literally 10 times less of a chance of interacting in any way with a police officer than a black person with no high school diploma. Literally, mass incarceration is a race and class paradigm, not just a race paradigm. What happens what happens in these conversations is that because capitalism is race, and this is the most important part. Capitalism requires black people to disproportionately be relegated to the reserve army of labor. So all of the harm that comes from being relegated to the reserve army of labor, crime, drugs, poor treatment, poor housing, poor education, is relegated to black people because capitalism requires that the supermajority of society, which is white, even though there are more whites that are poor, are relegated to thinking that the system does not disadvantage them or they would rebel. So capitalism requires that black people in the American context disproportionately suffer to keep the illusion of the functionality in the minds of the white majority. So there's no question that there's no debate that the system is racist, but the brunt of the racism is felt by poor and working class black people who are the supermajority of black people, while educated Negroes like Oprah and Frank Wilderson, who was like a second generation tenured black professor, are whining and crying about racism while they're sipping on their mint juleps, while the majority of black folk are not having the benefits of having people like David Brooks at the New York Times co-sign their writing. Or Ta-Nehisi Coates chilling, getting going to France, eating beignets or God knows what else. Because what happens? Hold on, let me finish. What happens is that middle class Negroes like ourselves pimp out the trauma of working class and poor black people. Oh, the racism be so bad, so we can get those fat 6-figure checks at the Atlantic or those 10-year jobs, because the black middle class for over a century has leveraged the suffering of poor and working class black people to allow itself to be ascended into the same grounding powder mechanisms that ground those poor and working class black people to dust. That is the reality.
Well, and the reality too is that some of the staunchest fighters for the black poor, the black working class, come from the black middle class as well. I mean, my parents
that has true, and they are the best of a bad lot.
Look, shots fired.
Yeah.
Where's the
but the whole thing is again to look at the efficacy of the effort. You know what I mean? Most of the people who showed up at the Gary convention, are now, their kids are in the black middle class now. You know what I mean? Like the aspirational trajectory of black folk is clearly not to be, among the poor and the working. I mean, in the the impoverished working class. You know what I mean? But that's why, like most of the freshmen at the HBCUs now are black women, and that the fastest growing population in terms of like self-owned businesses are among black women who come from the working class.
Well, I mean, Greg, listen, bro.
Hold on, Pascal. Hold on. Look, man, we didn't bring Greg on to have a talk about fucking Afro pessimism, and I blame this all on Derek Barnes.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm glad for the pushback. You know what I mean? It's like I brought Frank into it. You know what I mean?
Look. I just want to.
But all these things are connected. You know what I mean?
Let me just say this first, as a fan, like literally, Mr. Tate.
Yes.
I need you to understand that it is because of you and people like you that made me feel good about playing guitar as a black kid playing punk and metal music in my hood of Richmond, California. So I first and foremost have to get that out. And Frank Wilderson, unfortunately, is too
Frank is roadkill up in here.
I have a lot of friends that are a very good friend of mine is a fellow professor at Irvine with him, and actually got her doctorate around the same time. So unfortunately, this is tame compared to the conversations that Pascal and I have off air. And me and my friend that actually works with Wilderson, she and is a acolyte of Wilderson have off air. So this was not
what I had planned. And I mean the thing is in academia now, it's like radical black feminists have they've definitely picked the bones of what they feel they need out of AP, and for them he's not even in the conversation, but there are aspects of his critique that are part of the critique they're mounting within the academy, But again, like somebody said, you need to have a whole show on AP.
And we have to blame.
Let's get back to Earth, Wind, and Fire. Yacht rock and shit. We're gonna put Verdine and Philip Bailey up, on the double bill with Jimmy Buffett. Now that's their level.
Oh shit.
Right. Okay.
Go for it, Marcus.
All right, yeah.
We gonna forget about Serpentine Fire and let's go and that's the way of the world. Talking about mysticism and world philosophy and so forth and so on, and all help you get to a higher place.
As we get into the revolutionary nature of Margaritaville.
Brother, I hope I didn't put a bad taste in your mouth, brother. I just, we've interacted on social media before.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize now. No, man. No. Yeah.
Too late.
I mean, look, man. It's like, look, we are not in control of the way our culture just gets manipulated and twisted and discarded and assimilated. Over time. But I think we always have to remember that it starts out in the gut of America. It starts out among us. It starts out when we're the only ones to give a damn about a band called Funkadelic,
Well, and so the question that I have is, I guess, what, this is to the panel. What do y'all think is like the potential for music to aid in, a movement, or even like some type of like revolutionary behavior, right? And like we talk about how hip hop is like taken as like the extent of Black revolution in the 90s. But what can music do for people trying to take care of people?
We have to look. Well, I mean, I'm sure by now everybody's seen Summer of Soul. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like that, in that context, I mean, all that music was a soundtrack to a revolution. I mean, in fact, that, as we know, that concert, that series even happened because the powers that be in New York were afraid of another April 4th, 1968 happening. Because of the resistance and the furor against oppression that existed in the city, at that time, and was with the Black Panthers and the Young Lords, you know,
Mhm.
being kind of at their peak in terms of communicating, you know,
Mhm.
folks. But I mean, I don't know that any Panther, you know, like would have gotten up at that point in time and said anything, you know, would have read like David Nelson's poem, the way Nina Simone did. But Nina like kind of made her declaration, you know, with Mississippi Goddamn, you know,
Oof.
back in, you know, 63, 64, 65. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, she gave up a whole career, you know, to be who we know her as. You know what I mean? And you know, you have a Curtis Mayfield, like, I mean, yeah, man, folks on the line, you know, in the movement said like, yeah, that movement that music got us through all those jailings and beatings. You know, keep on pushing, moving up, we're a winner. You know what I mean? So we it's like we got a history of the inspirational power of our music, you know, when the funk is uncut. You know what I mean? Like to actually galvanize and spiritually inspire, you know, politically inspire folks to action, you know. But you know, it's again, man. I mean, we're you know, like I just like to be a certain realist about the cultural reality of America. You know, when it comes to the ability to put temptation and distraction and betrayal, you know, and confusion, you know, in our expressions of ourselves, you know, within the cultural commodity system. I'll say that.
I
You
want to
know,
ask you. I
so
want to go back to
stories,
your
many
writing.
stories. Yeah.
I want to go to your writing in your good old days. I'm originally born and raised in New York City, where you now live, Jamaica, Queens, to be exact. And I remember you from your days writing at the Village Voice. And I'm going to
Yeah.
bring
Long.
up.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up a figure controversial to some. Many people did not like, who I know you fondly eulogized for several days on social media, who I found to be an interesting person. I understood his shortcomings and his limitations, but we're going to talk about it because I'm glad you're on the show. Stanley Crouch.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew where you were going, man. I mean,
I thought it was
like-
Donald Rumsfeld.
Stanley Crouch did some shitting on hip hop.
Now,
but well, here's the thing with Uncle Stanley, you know, as Vernon Reed and I called him, you know, because you got one version of Stanley in the press, in the media, and then but if you talk to Stanley, you heard some other things. You know what I mean? Like he's the epitome of the complicated black man that nobody understood, maybe not even his woman. You know, Stanley enjoyed the position of being the provocateur and the contrarian, and the cat that just like made people's head hurt. You know what I mean? But he, you know, and he was also a careerist and an opportunist. You know, there were certain positions he took where he knew, like this was going to advance his position in terms of New York literary establishment, certainly. You know, and he was, you know, he's beloved by those folks. You know, but and you know, we used to go at it, you know, over different positions, and I saw his positions change, you know, around certain things, you know, because of the you know, the argument. It's like I remember when I first met him, you know, he was talking about Rastas and Bob Marley as quote, those guys with hair that looks like dirty pipe cleaners. Right. Now by the time Bob became lionized,
That's me.
Stanley was talking to me about how amazing a poet he was, you know. Or, you know, like Stanley's known for, you know, for writing these jihads against Miles Davis, you know what I mean? And his electric music. But then he pulled me aside and started talking about how ferocious that music was, and you know how excuse me, like what an amazing guitar player, you know, Pete Cozy was, and you know, like the noise he generated. So I mean, you know, it was like which Stanley Crouch were you gonna get from one day to the next? You know, were you gonna get like the aesthetician? You know, like the black musical aesthetician? Because there's no question. Like, if you go to where the brother was strongest, which is like his musical analysis. Oh, I mean, you know, he's kind of beyond peer, you know, in terms of his ears, like what he heard in music, you know. But I also feel like, you know, I started reading The Village Voice because of Stanley, because of what he was writing about, you know, his community, you know, in the cats that came to New York with him in the 70s, man, you know, David Murray's and Oliver Lake's, Butch Morris, Julius Hemphill's, all these cats, Cecil, you know, all these avant-garde, you know, the whole avant-garde scene. I started reading The Voice because I wanted to keep up with what my favorite cats were doing. And then but when Witten came along, the opportunist in him like leaped out like a big dog. I mean, he basically started trashing all his old friends to jump aboard, you know, that train, and they rode it all the way to you know, their own building in Lincoln Center, you know. So yeah, and I mean, you know, look, man, you just like, I mean, with any folks that like come to occupy a certain status and position in the New York cultural sphere, like there's a complicated story. There's a very complicated story to tell. And Stanley's is one I just know well because I watched it all happen, you know. But yeah, and even in turn, you know, it was like, you know, when you know, I was given that space to on Facebook. It was a lot of what I did was just reprinting the varied positions that people were taking, you know. So, you know, there was some folks I reposted just like, for them he was just a sellout Negro. To other folks that talked about, you know, like what a difference he made in terms of their careers as writers, the time he spent with them, you know. Like one of my dudes was talking about like, shit, when Stanley was in the hospice, you know, he went to see him every day, you know, and they watched some of their favorite movies or talked about, you know what I mean? Like, so you got a cat that just, you know, part of his complication is generating equal degrees of love and hate, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, all you got left with anybody is what's in the work, you know what I mean? Like, so when I read, like, Stanley wrote a piece that people couldn't even believe, like the Stanley Krause of 1980 wrote a piece that the people who knew the Stanley Crouch of like 1998 wouldn't even believe. It was a whole piece like celebrating funk inside of like avant-garde black music. You know what I mean? It's called rising Atlantis to the top.
And I want to
go ahead
about that to pivot away from Stanley Crouch. Sorry, Pascal.
Yeah.
Last night I watched the Rick James documentary on Showtime.
Thank you. I mean, I say thank you because, you know, I got a few things to say about that. Yeah.
I am a fan of Rick James music. That's why Rick James is the thumbnail. That's why Rick James is the picture behind us. It's a screenshot from the Super Freak video.
Brother, you see, I don't have the laptop position, but Glow is right here.
I saw that. I saw that behind you.
Out on myself. Right? Yeah.
So Rick James to me is an interesting figure because I feel like he takes what Parliament Funkadelic did or was doing at the time,
right,
and mixes it with pop music in a way that I think the only person that surpassed that maybe was Prince. Prince had more of a poppy feel to what he was doing, but it still was funky. Rick James kept it funky, kept it street, but also definitely had the hooks and grooves that helped him sell millions of records.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, the thing. Go ahead. Yeah.
So there's a pivotal moment.
Tell me what you thought of the film.
Oh, the documentary. I you know what? First of all, I never get to see Tanya Hijazi speak too much, and she's kind of a big character in his life. Sorry. post his fame years. So getting to see her speak, you never really get to see his kids speak. So hearing his kids speak. Hearing this band, I love Levi Ruffin. Actually, Levi Ruffin is hilarious to me, hilariously honest. I felt like a lot of the people they had in the documentary, and also taking old interviews from him, it was really, really interesting. And I've also known people because my short time in the music business that have crossed paths with Rick James and have their own Rick James stories to tell at various points of his life, right? Yeah. He's a bigger than life character that becomes a caricature, and then somehow towards the end makes that kind of work for him. He's a complicated figure because of how his life does end. I thought I did a pretty good job of telling that story, also, but also keeping it soundly in the music, not all about the drama, because the musical story of Rick James is very, very important. Going to Canada and finding yourself in the burgeoning music scene up there and being a player in it to the point where you then go take this new sound to Motown with the Minor Birds. That doesn't work out. You serve some time for being a draft dodger, then come back and writes for Motown. And I'm glad that they actually brought that up too. He was a staff writer and session guy.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of revelations. I mean, I like the story about how he got his cornrows. I mean, the African sister on a plane. and having her break it down and her doing his hair. And the next thing it's like, I mean, he it's like he comes up with his own version of being a long-haired rocker. I mean, I would say on balance, I have a problem with the second half of the film. I feel it's like too much cocaine and not enough reference back to the musical glory, And I felt like it got just a little too caught in a kind of a tabloid TMZ downward spiral in the second half. Could see why, like as a documentarian, you feel like you got to tell all of that story, but I feel there was a way to come back in the end to, why Rick James matters, So so it's a structural problem for me, structural storytelling problem. But getting there, was like, I mean, a hell of a ride. I mean, I love Kerry Gordy in there, man.
Yeah,
it was just like, that. I mean, the story about him jumping on the table and revving this thing, and the cat after that assault, the guy says, "We're about to make Lionel Richie happen."
So Pascal and Marcus and Eric, I'm gonna spoil this for you, and hopefully you guys go watch this documentary. It's on Showtime. So Kerry Gordy is Barry Gordy's son.
I'm the one who told you about the documentary.
No, you didn't. Motherfucking Showtime told me about the documentary. You ain't TV guy. So,
y'all brothers is live, man. I love it. I love it. I love this show.
I
talk about it. It's like that. Look, it's like I ain't got too many of my nerves that can go from Frank Wilderson to Rick James. y'all are a rarefied quantity of it is. Damn. So.
Hey, Marcus, check this out. You two, D. So apparently, Kerry Gordy, Barry Gordy's son, was managing Rick James, and he said Rick James would deliver a record. This is how you know this was back in the day. This shit doesn't happen anymore. Okay, Rick James would deliver a record, right? You deliver your tape, and the record label will give him $1 million. And so Rick James goes to deliver his record.
Unheard.
You're not doing this shit no more. Trust me, as a person that's delivered some records.
Right.
So Rick James delivers a record, right? The record before is the Street Songs, which got all the hits that not all the hits, but a lot of the hits that did great.
Yeah, it was. What shit, man? Some kind of multi-platinum record.
The next record doesn't do as well, right? On the live tour, doesn't do as well. So James is mad.
Which I'll interject as a
Go
friend
ahead.
of mine. No, I'll just say a friend of mine's dad is a basketball coach, and his famous saying is, "They don't pay niggas to sit on the bench." Right. So it's like, yeah, it's like if you ain't delivering like 6 million the next time, like you're useless. You're fodder.
And there's a
Garbage.
laundry list of bands, right? We can name that had a great record, and the second one doesn't do as well, and then all of a sudden nobody wants to fuck with you.
They're toast. Yeah, they're done. Because they don't pay niggas to sit on the bench.
James goes into the studio, the head of Motown, right? There's a white guy. This year that Berry Gordy's been gone.
Yeah.
And they said Rick James is so mad that he jumps on the tape, throws everything off the president's table, takes out an 8-ball of Coke, chops lines of Coke on the CEO's table, does a line, and Kerry Gordy said Rick James takes his dick and puts it into his face and starts hollering at him about he sold.
Well, it's about MTV. It's about MTV.
Yeah.
And
ultimately they give the budget, the promotion budget, to Lionel Richie, and that's when Off the Wall comes up.
Yeah,
not
well,
Off the Wall. That's on the ceiling. Sorry.
Well, and I mean, we had to say that, like, Rick James, I mean, he took it to the wall, took it to the mat, in terms of MTV not playing black artists, not playing him. I mean, to the point that, like, the label was pissed at him, for rising up, So I when you get to that segment of the thing and you look at how Prince happened because of Rick James, Michael happened, Run DMC, Lionel Richie is like, man, he's the Kurt Flood of music. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, he's the brother that sacrificed himself so that, so LeBron could create the big three in Miami. You know what I mean?
But is it worth it because he gets you can't touch this? Like, does MC Hammer want to sample Rick James 10 years later for You Can't Touch This if Rick James is what we see Prince become because of MTV? And I don't know if Rick James ever would have been what Prince or Michael Jackson were.
Well, I mean, it just comes down to the opportunities that are, again, in the changing same of black music. You know what I mean? Like, he had already made his, super freak money. You know what I mean? So by the time you get to Hammer, it's just somebody looking for like a great break beat. You know what I mean? It's like, it has really nothing to do with Rick James. Like, Rick James is the beneficiary because his name is on the publisher. You know what I mean? But the idea of Rick James is disappeared, and the annals of pop culture by that time. Like, it's just a great hook, that everybody knows. When great hooks were what was selling hip hop records, great R&B hooks of the 70s, what was selling hip hop records. Yeah,
and that's not even a hook. I mean, I think he took like the first 24 bars or some shit.
Well, that's a hook. Shit. Like, there's some hip hop hooks that are ain't but 2 bars, man. Like the Das Effect. The Das Effect song, microphone check. Man, that comes from James Brown's Think, and it's like, it's barely like a bridge. You know what I mean? Like, I was listening to that the other day. I was like, damn, they took 2 bars and made like a classic out of it. So, but that's hip hop, and that's hip hop, man. It's just that ability to like miniaturize like classic soul gold, and create a new hit on top of an old one.
That's what to me was artful about the sampling culture, either taking very rare records or taking these little bitty, like you said, 2 bars. De La Soul did it really well. The Paul's Boutique album.
Oh man, yeah.
Boys, it's kind of where you hear.
De La, man, they get props for, like, every well-known record they sample, when you hear the original, you think of their version. Like in your mind, you know what I mean? It's like, Break It Dawn.
Break It Dawn's gonna say especially Break It Dawn.
Say No Go. Me, Myself, and I. Like, if I hear Freak of the Week, I think of them. If I hear the Hall & Oates, I think of them. It works. That's how you know. That's how you know how musical those cats were. It kind of works. Works both ways. Yeah, but
by the time you get to Puffy, I think he takes. It's 48 bars.
Yeah.
I think he takes for that. Let's Dance.
That and you, to me, like, that's the real end of the golden age, when somebody who can rap actually can have a hit record. Because before then, you definitely had to have talent. You know what I mean? And he kind of transitioned us into this place where it's like you didn't have to be a real rapper.
Take that. Take that.
You know what I mean? But damn, that's also why, like, you got to give it up to RZA, because like he comes in the era where you can't afford samples. He's just like, okay, I'm gonna sample these kung fu movies for hooks.
Public domain.
Right. It's like, yeah, let me just totally violate territorial copyrights.
And I want to ask you before we go, because I got you here.
Yes.
So there's a group that big influence on me. Two groups big influence on me. One is Bad Brains, and I think Derek will speak to this since we're both punk guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bad Brains is a huge influence on me. Early Bad Brains, and Fishbone.
Yeah. I mean, like, the thing I appreciate them and about them and my boys who live in color is, like, they created original black rock music that required people inspired by them to actually learn how to play their instruments really well. Because they all because it's like, like punk rock before the Bad Brains just celebrated amateurism. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And these cats came out of the funk, they came out of go-go, and they came out of fusion. Like, like I think Daryl Jennifer told me, one day Dr. No showed up to their rehearsal, and he could play every lick of Return to Forever's Romantic Warrior. You know what I mean? So you talking about cats that took that level of musical prowess to creating their own genre. Fishbone did it in their own way, creating original music that is hella impressive on multiple levels. You know what I mean? Like on a sonic level, lyrical level, political level, trans genre splicing level, and really left a legacy of music for the folks that follow behind them, to really evolve as musicians within. You know what I mean? So, I mean they're but the Brains in particular, man. I mean they just it's like every once in a while, like a group comes along, and they just create music that would not have existed without them. And they do it masterfully, like early Earth, Wind and Fire.
not yacht rock, not yacht rock.
I'm just saying.
Like,
you go to the first five albums, they kill it. It was like,
when I hear Living Color, let's speak about Living Color.
Yeah. Right.
We were having a conversation on tour once about riffs, and that riff for Cult of Personality. When you talk about some of the best hard rock riffs of all time, you have to put that riff in there.
Oh, and I don't know if you know the story about that is that was something they just came up with jamming in rehearsal, man. And it just points to like what bands can generate that machines cannot. But that's the product of those four dudes you know, like having their own dedicated space in East New York when you could get shot in New York and not in East New York and not shoot the HBO series Girls. You know, but it was like, yeah, those brothers were over there 8 hours a day, and boom, one day they were, you know, they were just jamming, and that's what came out.
And
then Vernon told me, like, when they did the recording, it was like when he went to take his solo, he was tired. He was dead tired, man.
Mhm.
He didn't even want to do it. And then the solo we got is the classic. You know what I mean? But again, it's like, again, why bands can still, you know, could still matter. You know, I mean, it's kind of like, it's not even that. It's like, I think that like we're not going to get to that next evolution in terms of our music until we return to some semblance of band culture. Because, like, you know, like pretty much with digital culture, you know, we've established, you know, what you can do, and people are doing like variations on that. And, you know, I mean, I listen to something like the dance music that's coming out of South Africa now, Amiri Piano. And it's like, man, that's like the best chill music I've heard in years. You know what I mean? But it's not necessarily extending by leaps and bounds the vocabulary of the music, you know. So,
and can I ask this too? Like,
that's my 2 cents on that.
I mean, obviously, like, we're going through like a pandemic, and, you know, we talk about touring, and like, especially like Jason, you talk about this a lot.
Hello, where'd everybody go?
A little bit of like making, right? Like, of like,
I said, yo, where'd everybody go?
We're here.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, yeah, that was my point. Yeah, that was my point.
But yeah, as far as like even like making music, and even like as far as like
Living Color bands.
I don't think he hears.
Oh, word.
Oh, I hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We see you fine. We see you.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I was.
I said my piece on all of that, man. You know what?
Oh no, somebody's asking you another question.
Yeah, well, I got a question.
Oh, okay, that I'm not hearing. What's the question?
Hello. Can everybody hear
that
me?
Pascal? I see you said I have.
No,
a question,
it's Marcus. Marcus is asking you a question.
Okay.
It's
not hearing you, Marcus.
It's one of the It's just one of these silly people with the dirty pipe cleaner hair.
Yeah, I can't. I can't. What you know? I cannot hear Marcus. Well, repeat the question for me.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, just revert it around, and actually, if Jason, you kind of want to even talk about this, is like, COVID. Obviously, it is like separated a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anybody. Well, except for your. I'm hearing. Yo, I'm hearing your laughing ass. Okay, then I think I hear Pascal.
Test 1 2.
I haven't said anything.
I don't know, man.
You hear me?
Yeah. You go ahead. Yeah.
Marcus, try again.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Marcus is trying to ask a question, but he doesn't seem to be getting picked up by you.
The deep state got Marcus on punishment.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know if he's muted or what, but I'm not hearing him.
Well, yeah, y'all can hear me except for Greg.
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Derek. All right. Everybody can hear you on punishment.
Try
Can you hear him now, Greg? Can you hear him now?
Speak, Marcus. Speak.
Is there a limit?
I'm not.
Is there a limit?
Nah, we can't hear. Marcus, you on punishment?
Marcus, write this.
What is his question?
He's trying to ask. Marcus, write it in the chat. Write it in the chat, Marcus.
Write the question in the chat.
Okay.
Can you summarize it? You know what I mean?
Is there a limit to what can be done during this pandemic? You know, is music not going to be even full? And like even hip hop music, which is largely a digital thing, you know, until people can actually get in a room together and make music.
Marcus wants to know. I'm going to fuck this question up. He's talking about music during the pandemic and touring. And well, people are touring right now. I do know people that have actually caught COVID already on the road that were vaccinated, bands and crews. What do you see as the future of live music in the post-COVID era?
Well, it's funny. I was asked that question by a journalist by email, and I told him, I was like, oh, there's not going to be there's no such thing as a post-COVID era any more than there's going to be a post-climate change era. Like, COVID is here to stay. COVID is here to stay. COVID got mutant cousins. It's like, they got some new variant in South Africa. They talking about, you know what I mean? So
talking about
just like we live, it's like you're dealing with the seasonal flu on steroids, man. You know what I mean? It's like COVID ain't going nowhere. I mean, it's a determinant. It's going to be a determinant of everything that happens culturally and economically from here on out. You know, like they were saying, like somebody just told me that the reason that you didn't see as much seasonal flu is because COVID just came in there and took over. It just basically like wiped seasonal flu out and planted itself in that place in our respiratory systems. You know, but so it what you're going to see is how people are adapting to the new reality. So when we played Lincoln Center, Burn Sugar played Lincoln Center a couple of weeks ago. You got seats by going online and applying to a lottery, and so, and the audience, it was, they had what they call the pod system, like two chairs, kind of, put together, and that's how folks were sitting, and it was probably a third of the usual capacity, like we've got situations where we're being offered outdoor gigs, and the protocol will change before you get to the gig. Like we just did Brooklyn Museum, and at first they weren't requiring proof of vaccination. It was just they were gonna have everybody sign a waiver that basically absolved the museum of responsibility if your ass got sick. But the week of the gig, they were just like, yeah, nobody's coming in here who can't show proof of vaccination. So, it's like when you try to be predictive about the future of live music, you just know that, at best, it's going to be like what we saw with the, with the NBA, like in this past season where it was like, it would start out, it was only 5,000 people, in the arena. And then, we thought okay, we had turned that curve. So by the end of the thing, I think they had 20,000 people in a what is it, 50,000 seat arena.
Well, what I think. This is what I think.
Go ahead.
And this is just my working in festivals and doing the finance side of it, the number side of it. This is what I think.
Yeah,
I think that Fire Festival was not an aberration as far as a bunch of really, really rich people going to an island to go hear music live and feel very comfortable about who they're being around. And the pod system for a lot of places is extremely expensive because you have to buy multiple tickets. So even if just you and a homie want to go, and it's not all the time, sometimes you have to buy 3 or 4 tickets. I may not have 3 or 4 ticket money. So who is good? First of all, who is going to be the band or act that's going to command that someone pay more money? Because you also have to pay more money for food and beverage, because that's a whole different entity that deals with.
Well, yeah, I think what we're going to move towards, and here's where, we can really get into some interesting conversations. Like I read somewhere somebody was saying that, China is becoming a more capitalist country, and America is actually becoming a more socialist country, because they said he said basically if you're in China, like you have the most secure private property rights in the world, whereas in America, there definitely would have been a revolution without them damn stimulus checks. You know what I mean? So, and I just say that to say that anytime you go to see music in Europe, it is taxpayer subsidized, because culture is subsidized there. So, like, a band that might be able to get capacity at the Blue Note for one night can go over to Europe and play a festival with 50,000 people in it, playing some some dissonant avant-garde stuff.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because those culture in those social democracies have decided that culture matters as much as food. So we're gonna make it available to our folks, and we're gonna be able to bring over the best performers from Black America to play it, because we don't have people that can do it on the level that they can. So I mean, if I had any kind of basically saying like the subsidizing of live music on that arena level, that stadium level, I mean, it's gonna have to come through our tax dollars, if it's gonna happen at all, because people are not going back to these stadiums in those numbers.
No. No.
To support
small, small venues got bought out at the end, and also too with a lot of the CARES Act money that was supposed to go to helping small venues really didn't. A lot of real estate companies got it. So I think what we're seeing is the death of the small venue. As you know, as a New Yorker, you know this better than anybody. I can't think of anywhere I played in New York that's still open. And I was just in New York in 2019.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in fact, I told you where our first two gigs were at subsidized arts venues like Lincoln Center, Brooklyn Museum, and then we've got there's a festival coming up on my block, the Sugar Hill Jazz Festival, and that's happening because the sister organizing it had a wealthy friend that said, "I'll just bankroll your whole thing. Don't even worry about it." But then our next gig after that is up at a place called Real Artways in Hartford. Again, subsidized cultural institution. You know what I mean? So, those are the places, but those places are equivalent to what you find in Europe, for jazz. I mean, one of the things I found out from Burnt Sugar going to Paris so many times is man, the blackest hood in Paris has a state of the art a Lincoln Center or a Brooklyn Academy of Music level venue in there. It's I mean, you can literally get off a train in some place that literally looks like Brooklyn Mall in terms of the demographic, but you cross the street and it's you got an Alice Tully Hall to play in. You know what I mean? So that's I mean, it's just it's just what a society has decided matters for the population, like free healthcare and free college, but I don't see how economically the cultural venues, the college venues, are going to survive, for 10 years more without, them becoming socialized.
Do you think there's limitations to music being made during COVID due to the reliance on digital mediums?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, it's back to the thing I was saying about, the cult of personality riff comes out of five cats sweating in, in a do or die rehearsal studio in East New York. You know what I mean? It's like that. I mean that latency factor. Yeah, that's it. That's not working, man. That streaming band stuff is everybody knows. You can't stay on the one when everybody is behind the beat. You know what I mean? Because of digital transmission. So, yeah, I mean, to the extent that folks can't can't just get together and play and make the magic happen in front of an audience, man. Yeah, you know, like, because everybody's just not, you know, like, you know, I mean, trap, making the perfect trap beat is not everybody's aesthetic goal. You know what I mean? Like, they got that down. You know what I mean? But if you're trying to do something else, you know, you definitely need like, you know, you need the old world conditions. You know.
Oh, I miss being in a room. I haven't been in a room with my bandmates since we loaded out our last show, January 2020.
No, man, we went up. Yeah, we did a for the Lincoln Center show about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, we did our first rehearsal together in a year and a half, man. You know, and we were in a well ventilated room, and you know, and because it was kind of pre Delta paranoia, you know, like folks eventually took off their masks. Some, you know, a couple folks didn't. You know, they did the whole rehearsal in there, and you know, like one of our cast, you know, he did the Brooklyn Museum gig in his mask, man. You know, so you got but this is all adaptation. You know, I mean, you know, like when we talk about you know, like a post-COVID world, it's like, no, it's kind of like it's an adaptation to COVID world in which, you know, we're gonna take risks. You know, I mean, that's the whole thing.
It was a trumpet player.
What's that?
It was a trumpet player wearing the mask the whole time, I think, right?
Oh, say again. Lost.
It was Marcus. Don't worry about it, man. It was Marcus again. Nobody had to worry about
it. Derek had a question.
Yeah,
he's on punishment. I get you.
It was kind of an observation and a question, but I've been thinking about the risky musicians because of our friends here. One of the people that we lost was a jazz musician, and they continued performing for a while, like way later than I would expected them to during the first round of COVID. But now all those clubs have just gone away. Like they're all gone. And there's kind of two things that I see that echoes that, right? Like all the jazz clubs, most of the punk clubs, they're all gone. They've been actually kind of exploding here in Salt Lake because we're way cheaper than New York and California. Right. But that's changing rapidly. So, but we,
I mean, you know, it's go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just think, I think we underestimate the danger to musicians though, because that's who we've lost, you know, musicians and like,
well, I mean,
nurses and teachers.
I can tell you, it's like, I got a 15 to 17 piece band, depending on the gig. It's like nobody is more concerned about the survival of musicians than musicians themselves, you know. And to the extent that we're able to offer work, again, it's because there's subsidized institutions that are opening back up where you know, like, you know, folks can gig and still be paid because, you know, musicians are as much as part of the gig economy as, like, you know, food delivery folks and you know, Lyft and Uber drivers. You know, like the average working musician. You know, we're talking about, like, you know, the difference between the class difference. You know, between the majority of folks and, you know, the folks at other end of the scale. It's like, I mean, the music business is kind of the epitome of that. Like, I mean, you know, there's cats that, I mean, they're dealing with a sliding pay scale. They were in the best of times. They were dealing with a sliding pay scale. So you might go to Europe and, you know, make a grand for a gig and come back and do a $50 gig in New York, or a string of $50 gigs, you know, door gigs in New York, because folks just stacked up the dollars. That was the whole thing, you know. And music, I mean, New York has some of the best musicians in the world. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, like the First Call cats here, like you never heard of them, but, you know, they're the guys that, you know, the folks that if you tell them on Wednesday, I need you to learn every song on the Songs in the Key of Life by Friday, they'll come in having that thing down, you know. But they're working for pennies on the dollar, man. You know.
Yes.
And Yeah, but they were willing to take all of those shit gigs, you know, because it's like the pennies add up, you know, and now that, you know, that's not there. So, you know, I mean, you know, folks, you know, I mean, you know, folks been struggling through it. You know, folks had to figure something out. You know, um, the entire business of live music is definitely going to be about risk and adaptation going forward. That's just the way it is. It's like, you know, what your gut tells you to do. You know,
That's that's kind of
yeah.
how I feel. It boils down to what you feel comfortable doing, and I'm hearing way too many horror stories from people that are actually out there. And also, I have friends that are touring nationally that and doing it on it because all the venues, not all, but a lot of these venues are closed. They're going back to backyard shows, house shows.
Man. Well, yeah. I mean, Living Color just did like a little mini tour with a bunch of other indie bands that were popular, like when they blew up. I think Hobo Stank, you know, was on the tour. I forgot the other cast, but Vernon told me like he was thinking about taking like some cruise gig, and his wife and daughter just put the foot down on that. it's like forget about.
Do not do that.
You know what I mean?
Don't go on a cruise.
So it's like, but that gets to what we talk about, man. It's like the risk and adaptation. You know what I mean? It's just like, is it really worth it? You know, to do a cruise gig now. You know, even though the money may be
no.
Yeah. But I'm saying, like, you know, like we all are not going to be offered the cruise gig. Living Color is. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
So they got a decision to make. You know what I mean? Because there are crazy people still getting on cruises. You know what I mean? Taking cruises, and they're taking these music themed cruises too. You know, and if you look, you know, it's that thing. Like, Living Color don't want to do it, some other band will. You know, but yeah, I mean, on the whole going forward thing, like that's just my, you know, like, I mean, you know, kind of the same place. You know, yeah, you know, it's like
I'm terrified of what scares me more is and I don't know if you guys have this where you guys are. I'm assuming it's everywhere. Past Derek and Marcus, people making fake vaccine cards.
Yeah, we got plenty of that here.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't seen that, but you know, I think that's. But what we have had to respond to is we got members who, for personal, political, medical reasons, aren't plan to never get vaxxed. You know, and like right now, the situation is such that everything we're offered is requiring people to be vaxxed to play.
Yeah.
But you know, there's some situations that have also coming up there outdoors where they're not requiring that, and you know, so we had to put it to a vote in the band. You know, I mean, you know, about how do you feel about rehearsing and performing with folks, and you know, would a 72-hour COVID test, basic free COVID test, be enough, or are you going to require folks to, if they want to play, they're gonna have to spend that, you know, $250 to $300 to get the PCR. You know, like these are things that are on the table now. You know, for like working musicians. You know?
Well, we just lost in the Bay Area a pretty well-known rapper, Zion, who did not want to get vaccinated, and he caught COVID and sadly passed away.
Yeah, and it's to the point, man, where you know, it's like these are, you know, and I like, these are homies, man. These are people, like, some people have been with the band from the beginning.
Yeah, from
before the beginning. You know, I go back with some of our folks, like, you know, to Howard and the foundings, you know, Howard in the 70s and the founding of the BRC in the 80s. You know what I mean? So, but you having to make these decisions like by kind of democratic consensus, because like you got folks in the band who, like, they're about zero tolerance when it comes to taking a risk of being in a room with somebody that's not vaccinated. You know, like, and this is what's on the table. You know, like people, you know, again around this whole question about like, what does the future look like? This is the future is now. This is what the future looks like. You know, like, you know, and I mean, and I'm sure it's like our band, we got enough people to cover. You know,
Yes.
the exclusions, you know, but you know, you dealing with like, you know, duos, trios, quartets, and whatnot. It's like, yo, man, it's like Civil War. Families are coming apart. You know what I mean?
Well, some big band just broke up. Derek, what band was that just dropped their drummer because he wouldn't?
Oh, yeah.
Offspring. Is it Offspring or
Yeah, it's the Offspring.
Offspring, yeah.
I think it's the Offspring.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Drop their drummer.
You know,
like, you got to go.
It's like, yeah, you know, see you.
You got to keep them separated, right? That's their song.
love you, man. You know, like, yeah. You know, we'll see you at the Kmart. Like, yeah, man. That's you know, and you know, it's kind of like in my mind, I always like I'm about just thinking about short-term forecasting, you know, in the sense that I'm curious about, well, where possibly might we be 6 months from now, you know, like kind of going into the next spring. You know, because I mean, winter's gonna like make a lot of these conversations about touring and everything, and even having outdoor venues to, you know, kind of moot. But yeah, like where's it all gonna be like come April? You know, a little more than 6 months, but you know, you kind of get
Lambda variant.
So, Greg, we are coming up on the tail end. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to come and talk about some subject matter controversial, some not. But I'm glad I was able to do this because when my host Jason Miles, you know, we're friends, brothers. Sometimes we disagree.
Yeah.
But
we need this, man. We need this.
I just mentioned to him, I was like, you know, I'm Facebook friends with Greg Tate. He was like, you know Greg Tate? I was like, well, I don't know him. I'm Facebook. I was like, maybe I can get him on the show. He's like, no, you're killing. I was like, I'll just ask the brother I get him on the show. I commented on his wall before. We been following each other. I think he knows who I am. I'll ask him. And he was like, down. And Mark and Jason was like, he's gonna do it. He was like, yeah, he's gonna be on the show. And I wanted you to know that I feel good that for my man Marcus, who recently celebrated a birthday, who was on vacation, that you were able to come on the show because, you know, I like when Marcus is happy about his music. As somebody who's trained in something that is limited in its creative value, which is the law, I appreciate that my intellectual partner on the show is someone who does music because I find people, particularly Black folk, who are created artistically to be just fascinating, amazing people. So I just want to let you know how happy it made me to have you here to make him happy. Since I'm learning now that you are kind of the role model one of the role models that helped him get into his position as a Black, you know, heavy metal guitarist. And I want to thank you so much for serving that so we could have young brothers.
We all just passing it forward. You know what I mean? Paying it forward. You know what I mean? Like, because Vernon and I talk about it all the time. Like, you know, when we were youth, you know, in DC and Brooklyn, you know, coming up, it was always, you know, it was always like older cats that kind of pulled us aside, said, yeah, check this out, or, you know, supported us or trained us. You know what I mean? And so you kind of, you know, you knew when you got the opportunity, like you had to pay that forward, man. So, you know, glad I could be of some assistance to the brothers, you know, and the Black Rock Coalition and our compadres and Fishbone and Bad Brains and Living Color, you know, like really, really, really provide an example, like you can do this, you know, and you know, I mean, and then on the piece just about, you know, like having, like, you know, bringing like musicians into these conversations, man, is really critical, because, you know, some of the most advanced critical thinkers I know are musicians, and they have also figured out ways within that gig economy to not compromise themselves, stay true to the art, and still keep the bills paid, you know, because you know, I mean, yeah, because somehow my folks have figured it out for the last year and a half. It's like, you know, and it ain't been off of no Trump stimulus checks. So Trump, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, but you know, like players are resourceful. You know, artists are resourceful. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I mean, artists are the one. I mean, you know, we know that like every gentrified neighborhood started out being somewhere that you know, where angels and only musicians dared to tread. You know what I mean? It was just like, but you know, bombed out sections of cities. You know, it's like, oh, they got some room in there for me to rehearse. Hey, I'm going to there. You know.
Well, listen, man. I hope you enjoy your experience here enough to try to come on if we invite you again.
Oh no, homie. Look, yo, like, we having this Frank Wilderson in the black middle class. No, it's like, you know, I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, like it's cool pushing back on Earth, Wind, and Fire as yacht people. That's easy. You know what I mean? Like, no, we, you know, no, we, you know, like, yeah, you know, we. No, I wanted to get into those class complexities, which, you know, and the whole notion of you know, black middle class radicality and service to the race. You know, all of that.
Oh no,
So
we definitely, man. You know, I mean, I've been an admirer of your social media commentary, your work at The Voice. I remember you from back in the days of The Voice, your writings, your books as well. So I mean, you know, whether I agree or disagree, man, I always appreciate what you have to say. But one thing I got to do is respect the breadth of your knowledge and intellectual Rolodex of Black popular culture and music knowledge, which is, you know, if there's a Black music documentary that's good and you ain't in it, I don't know that it exists.
No, it's funny, man, about the Rick James thing. This friend of mine, like, she had seen me in so many documentaries. So when she heard about Rick, she said, "You in that?" I said, "No. I mean, they got Ty Boyd, they got Jason King." She was like, "Why not?"
Because Todd Boyd be fucking fighting for them roles.
Oh yeah. It's like I don't really have to be in every one for it to be legit. Square biz, you know. But yeah.
Well, on that note, guys, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you all. Yeah, the heard and the unheard. Thank you all.
That's a lovely limited edition Bitter Lake hoodie you're wearing, Marcus, that no one else can buy. And in the spirit of Black Rock, let's go out with some heavy metal.